Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
President Biden and Prime Minister Truss clash over economics ahead of talks in New York today.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 21st of September. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And leading the news this morning, the Prime Minister will use a speech at the UN in New York to tell world leaders that they must prioritise economic growth to combat Russian manipulation of the economy.
In her first foreign trip as PM, she'll also hold talks with US President Biden, where tensions are predicted to arise around the Northern Ireland Protocol and Truss's support for trickle-down economics.
The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, will today set out details of a major government support package for business. The plans could cost tens of billions and will also benefit schools, hospitals and charities.
And in Ukraine, separatist leaders in 4 Russian-occupied regions have announced plans to hold referendums on joining Russia starting this Friday. NATO has called the move a sham.
Well, when you think about it, it's like, we'll invade your territory, we'll kill people and blow up things and whatever, and then we'll give you a chance to say, do you want us to stay here or not?
Well, the difficulty of that is, if it, in this sham election does go in favour of rejoining Russia, suddenly Ukrainian soldiers who are there are in Russian territory, and then Russia can claim that's a declaration of war. It's hugely complicated,
Well,
very
as
worrying.
said, it's a sham. What do you think? Get in touch with your thoughts. You do it the usual way. We love to hear from you. We'll have a good natter throughout the programme.
We will.
gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News.
So our top story this Wednesday, and the Prime Minister will today address the United Nations, where she'll tell the assembled world leaders that economic growth is needed to combat Russia.
Now, all of this comes ahead of a meeting between the PM and President Joe Biden. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is in New York with the very latest.
Well, it's the Prime Minister's second day here in New York, and there are kind of 2 key moments to watch out for. First of all is that meeting with the US President Joe Biden. Of course, it was due to take place in Downing Street on Sunday, but that was cancelled and now will be held on the fringes of the United Nations General Assembly. And there really is one issue that's going to dominate, and that is the war in Ukraine, particularly as we all wait to hear what President Putin may well say. But it will be a show of cooperation and of continued support, if you like, for Ukraine from the US and the UK. We heard of that extra commitment in terms of military aid yesterday from the Prime Minister, and I suspect that today, essentially, we will hear the same message from both President Biden and indeed Liz Truss. It is interesting, isn't it, that they are determined to present this united front. And it is, at the second occasion, the main occasion, if you like, for the Prime Minister. When she addresses the UN General Assembly later on, all world leaders get a chance to do this once a year, that Ukraine will unsurprisingly dominate that speech as well. She's going to talk about how she says democracies need to harness the power of cooperation since the invasion in order to constrain authoritarianism. And she's also going to say that free countries around the world need to prioritise economic growth and security. That security, not just in terms of military and defence, but also in terms of energy and food supply, in order to win, she says, the new era of strategic competition. And she's also going to continue to commit the UK, and this was announced a little earlier on in the year by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, that there will be 3% of the UK's GDP spent on defence spending by the end of the decade. So Ukraine is the big issue here in town for the Prime Minister and indeed for the UN as it gathers this week. But it is also interesting that lots of the questions of Liz Truss over the last 24 hours, and I'm sure this will continue into today, is what we can expect domestically at home, not just around that extra aid for businesses that we're likely to hear of later on this morning in terms of the cost of living crisis and the cost of energy, but also what we may well hear in that mini budget tomorrow when it comes to tax cuts. Fascinating that on the world stage, as she addresses world leaders for the first time as Prime Minister, that many people at home want to hear what the Prime Minister has in store for them this autumn and winter during that cost of living crisis.
Not far off the party conference season either. So how could what Liz Truss is talking about, debating about, could affect Conservative popularity here? Joined now with the head of political polling at Opinion Research, and that is Chris Curtis. Chris, what do you take away from all of this, and what sort of effect do you think what Liz Truss is saying is having?
Well, the big argument at the moment is about the economy, unsurprisingly, because it's the biggest issue facing the country. Massive increase in energy prices, cost of living crisis, potential recession around the corner. And I think what's interesting is Liz Truss has been around saying, I don't mind being unpopular as a pollster. That's kind of a weird thing to be hearing from a politician. And I think, broadly speaking, that's not unfair, because a lot of these policies she's putting forward are very different to where the country are in economic. We've been talking for years about how the public are maybe to the right of politicians on cultural issues, Brexit, immigration, but to the left of politicians on economic issues. And Liz Truss so far is ignoring that. She's saying we're going to prioritise tax cut for businesses, we're going to prioritise tax cuts for rich people. She's really doubling down on this hope that she can put this stuff forward now. It can be incredibly unpopular, completely distant from where the public is, but that it is going to help grow the economy, which means come the next election, we've got a growing economy, and people give her credit for that and don't punish her for all of the unpopular decisions she's making now.
She's trying to paint a comparison with Margaret Thatcher all the time. And Margaret Thatcher came through with being unpopular, and she basically is putting in the back of Conservative Party members for the conference in their minds, I'm Maggie Mark too.
Yeah, that's true. And Margaret Thatcher, is still reasonably popular in the country today among large groups of voters, and seemed to have been a successful prime minister, which we haven't had many of between her and now. I think the main thing to sort of note with this, though, is that while we remember Thatcher that way now, it came pretty damn close to falling apart. Her first few years were incredibly unpopular. Before she went on to win the Falklands War. Now, I don't think Liz Truss can hope that a sort of popular, a small winnable war, which increases her popularity, is going to come across on the horizon. She needs to, in a very short space of time, turn the economy around from the potential recession we're about to face to a period of growth before the next election. And I think that's a massive task that she is gambling her entire premiership on.
Yeah, and, day 16 of her premiership, and she is still 10 percentage points behind Labour in the polls. So it is a huge gamble for her. And here she is being sidelined by the US president. This meeting in Downing Street cancelled on Sunday. Now he's putting out a tweet, apparently, directly criticising her approach to economics and this trickle-down...
All right, he was put into row 14 in the Abbey.
He was put into row 14 in the Abbey, but here we are, her camp coming out instantly saying this is absolutely, you know, just coincidental timing, it's nothing to do with our politics per se. But I read that exact phrase in the papers here on Sunday in the UK, that he was distancing himself from her Reagan Thatcherite economics because he didn't believe in trickle-down policies. So there's briefing coming from Washington. There has to be. This isn't just a coincidence.
I think it is worth noting that obviously, you know, the rest of the world is to a certain extent pulling back. The US is the most important example, but it is to a certain extent pulling back from the kind of, you know, economics that Thatcher and Reagan put forward. But while the rest of the world's doing that, Liz Truss is very much doubling down on it and hoping it's going to be successful. It is a big economic argument that's going to be in the coming years. I think the other important thing to note, though, is that, you know, we sort of put together Reagan and Thatcher as if they had the same economic policy. They actually had quite different economic policies. Reagan was in the camp of cutting taxes but not cutting spending, you know, massively blowing up the debt and the deficit. Thatcher, yes, she cut taxes, but she also cut spending and kept the debt and the deficit under control. Actually, when you look at Liz Truss's policy so far, she's still keeping the triple lock on pensions in place. She's still keeping spending on the NHS in place. She's just spent loads of money freezing energy bills. She's very much more in the Reagan camp of economics than in the Thatcher camp. And it's important, I think, to differentiate those two groups.
Well, Chris, what we want to do is to find out what camp one of our listeners and viewers is. That's William Pickup. We go to Glossop in Derbyshire, where William's watching us this morning and listening. Good morning. William. Hiya, what do you make of what you're hearing so far today ahead of conference season?
I agree with virtually everything that Chris has just said. It's, you know, she is trying to move herself more to the Thatcherite type policies. She has only got a very short space of time. For me, I think as we stand today, the next general election is already lost. I think that the polls show that. I think people feel it's time for a change. They believe that Boris did a good job with Brexit. A member of the Conservative
Party. Just to make that clear, William, you say that as a Conservative, that the next election is lost?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. Right. That's where we stand today. And what she's going to have to do in the next 2 years, which is an incredibly short space of time. Thatcher won an election. She had 5 years ahead of us to get through the mess. What Truss is going to have to do is be bold. And that's what she started to do. She started to create clear blue water between her and Starmer. It's a gamble, but it's a gamble she has to take, just like energy costs and the debt.
Well, let's go to the pollster here, Chris Curtis, and see if he thinks that's a gamble that would pay off.
Well, I suppose what you have to remember is the difficult situation that Liz Truss is in, right? It was always going to be very, very hard for her to win the next election. They've been in power for a very long time. We're in an incredibly difficult economic situation. So this was never going to be easy. There's no easy choices for her to make. I think there is a strong argument that just going really hard for growth and hoping for the best is her best chance of winning the next general election. But having said that, I still think it's going to be incredibly tough, given the time frame, given what she's trying to do over such a short space of time. I think it's going to be incredibly tough for her to win the majority of the next election.
Let's just get William's thoughts on that then. You know, kind of agreeing with what you're saying, William, but also saying it's very difficult to turn things around in the time frame that Liz Truss has got. How much does that worry you, given your prediction there?
Well, it is worrying, obviously, if you want the Conservatives to get in at the next election. But I think people do feel there's time for a change. Yeah. And if the Tories don't get on top of immigration, don't get on top of the energy cap and the economics of this, don't demonstrate the green shoots of economic growth in the next 2 years, they'll be toast.
Well, those words, we'll leave it. Thank you very much indeed, William Pickup, GB News viewer and listener, and regular contributor to the programme. You can be like William if you want to get in touch with us. We'll be glad to air your views as well. William, thank you very much indeed. Chris,
thank you.
Thank you. Chris Curtis beside me here is head of political polling at Opinium Research. Thank you. Always good to hear from you.
OK, with the time at 12 minutes past 6, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. And the Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is set to unveil details of a government support package to help businesses with their energy costs this winter. Ministers say the 6-month scheme will also include schools, hospitals, charities and other non-domestic consumers.
The government is being urged to reinstate the eviction ban during the cost of living crisis. The Kerslake Commission on Homelessness and Rough Sleeping says failing to do so could cause a catastrophic homelessness crisis.
Citizens Advice says up to 30% of your energy bill could be going straight out of the window due to a lack of insulation. It says over 1 million people living in homes with an energy rating of F will lose £950 worth of the heat they pay for through the walls, windows and roof.
That's why a good heavy pair of curtains is a good investment.
Absolutely, yeah. Curtains, double glazing, proper insulation, can't go wrong.
Curtains have sort of gone out of fashion because people tend to use, voiles
Plantation shutters and
yes, and plantation shutters and all that. But we don't live in plantation areas like the deep south. And it's humid, sticky heat.
I know.
Quite the reverse.
Yeah, I do like a good, thick, heavy velvet curtain. Lovely.
Yeah, and it's winter and, hide behind that sort of thing. I did watch TV with a blanket over me last night.
Did you?
Yes.
Oh, it's getting a bit cosy and snuggly.
And I thought to myself, well, and it works very well, and it makes me feel, and it helps the way you and I talk about not being able to sleep. The actual, if you put a blanket over you, this was a woolen sort of thick blanket, it does make you think.
The weight of a blanket.
Yes.
Can't beat it.
I agree with you.
Yeah, a weighted blanket. It's a well-known sleep aid. Look, we're going to turn our attention now to Ukraine. Lots of news coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Western leaders have condemned plans now by 4 Russian-occupied regions to hold referendums in Ukraine on joining the Russian Federation.
NATO has called this move a sham. President Zelensky has said that it's evidence that Ukraine has the upper hand in the war. I want to get the view now, Defence Editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. I know normally, Robert, you talk about, tactics and whatever, but this is tactics from the Russians. So they move into these areas, they kill and beat up people and blow the place to pieces. And then they say, but here's a poll. Do you want to stay? Do you want to be our friend and we'll not mess you about anymore or not? The UN saying is sham. Surely it is.
The other thing that is so worrying about this is they're now saying that most of the votes will be recorded remotely.
Yeah.
So this is Mr. Prigozhin of the Concord Catering Company and then head of the Troll Factory, who's now in charge of mercenaries for Ukraine, will be in charge of this one, and you'll get absolute gobbledygook coming out of it. But it's very ominous because every single one of these areas in which the 4 referenda are going to take place is not securely held by Russian troops now. They went in to defend Luhansk and Donetsk in the east, and as you were saying in your introduction, the Ukrainians are pushing in quite dramatically, still pushing into those areas. I mean, Donetsk airport itself could fall.
These polls could be a military operation as well, basically because it then saves them having to secure those areas. If the people themselves say they fear what's coming and they say, look, OK, Russia, we'll go with you, then that actually saves all this offensive stuff.
No, we know what the result of these polls is going to be anyway, and it's a challenge. And what is happening with Putin is that he seems to be doubling down, but that's doubling down in Western civvy journo speak, but he's breaking one of the most fundamental military maxims, which is never reinforce failure. And that's what he is doing. The weakness in all of this is that Putin hasn't got the military power to do this. But what is worrying is the propaganda which is coming out of the parliament, the Duma, but particularly people like Olga Sokubaya, the great talking head on state television, saying, you'll be attacking Russian territory, so we're going to double down. You give better missiles, and then it means that Russia becomes within range. So Poland and even Ramstein, the great US base, comes within range. The trouble is, it is dangerous talk, which could cost an awful lot of lives. But what he is gambling on, what they're all gambling on, is that they'll split Europe over this. You know, time to say, let's get a deal at all costs. We really don't want more war on the eastern fringes of Europe, and perhaps we can get a deal over gas. But that is very much up in the air. But it is quite clear that Putin himself is the prisoner of even harder-line people than he is. The speeches in the Duma over the past 2 weeks have been saying, let's eradicate Ukraine. I mean, saying dreadful things like that.
Is that a symptom of what I've been reading in the press, is that, you know, some people speculating the 40% chance the war could be over this year? There's this increased pressure and panic in the Kremlin, not least with these rumours that were swirling last night that he was going to make his first address since that invasion in February, which he then cancelled. We've got reports that he's going to be recruiting convicted murderers and criminals from the prisons to join the Wagner group, which is terrifying. These kind of extreme changes of tax with the referenda as well. A man under pressure. Yes.
And indeed, the best commentary is saying, go back to COVID. I'm not being silly. Why didn't he have a general lockdown? Because he felt that such would be the reaction, that it would show that he's not in full control. This is why they're pushing him, these hardliners even by his standards, to have a full mobilization. But the view is that people will not respond to them. The laws, there were 3 laws in the last 36 hours rushed through the parliament saying that, you know, if you refuse to fight, if you disobey orders, you know, the death penalty in some cases, there is absolute desperation. And this is what some in the West have feared. Some really good commentators with long vision were saying back in February, you know, the prospect of some real sort of crack-up in the power apparatus in Russia is very dangerous for everybody. But we are where we are, and this is why I think Liz Truss was very strong in saying, no, we're not going to stop supporting. We are going to put what we've put in already.
Here's the fascinating thing. The Ukrainian army are not waiting for those reinforcements, are they? They are going out, they are pushing, they are recapturing Russian equipment and turning it round on them.
Yes, and that's what Western armies have got to learn from the Ukrainians. We're on a learning curve. I've talked to several Brits who've been out there with them. It's Roddy the Road Scout. They are absolutely amazing. You look at the pictures very carefully. When the Ukrainians capture a tank, what do they go for first? No, it's not a bit of the ammunition. It's the tracks. They take the caterpillars off the tanks and the carriers, bodge them up in very, very quick time, apparently, and so they got spares for their own forces. In-fighting forces confronting them on this enormous front of 800 miles or so, there's now, can you believe it, from what we were saying back in February, there's almost parity between anything the Russians can bring forward and what the Ukrainians are doing. And the Ukrainians do have one strength, and it's what's called the moral component. And it doesn't mean say, I'm good, you're bad. It's the strength in believing what you're doing. And the Ukrainians believe in what they're doing because it's survival, and a lot of the Russians
do we not believe in what we're seeing? I mean, you say the Russians don't have the military might, and I'm thinking, well, there's only 2 big superpowers in the world, the USA or Russia. And you see, you know, on May Day, the Red Square and the military march by, whatever. And Ukraine, well, I never thought of as any sort of military might at all. And you're saying that they can out-militarize the Russians?
Well, because they maneuver much better.
Yeah.
They're doing a kind of extraordinary thing. We talk, one of these fancy phrases you both know. Oh, what does it really mean? Hybrid warfare. But this is a make-do war that the Ukrainians have put together. No, it isn't a modern army like the best of NATO, the best divisions that you would get, particularly from the Americans. But it's getting there. And the one thing that we don't see, and I would like to understand more and more, and it's the bit that they're not telling us about for very good reason, this is the first digitalized war. And a lot of these people, you see these HIMARS artillery and so on, it's the info they're getting about targets, which is so quick, so rapid, and so networked. And I think 2 NATO powers, above all others, have been particularly strong in helping that. And it's the US, and funny enough, the UK.
Robert Fox, thank you very much indeed. Always fascinating to listen to you. And the info that we're getting this morning in On the Wires is that it's your birthday today.
Happy birthday.
21 again.
Well, the 21st, 21 in there somewhere, isn't there? 21st of September. Thank you for getting up so early on your birthday. And you're exactly between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in years, aren't you?
Yes.
So,
oh, well done.
well
done
all of
for
that.
working
Doing well
that
all of
out.
that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, both of you.
Thanks, Robert. Thank you very much indeed.
Do stay with us. We're going to take a look now at the link between alcohol consumption and cancer, something to make you sit up this morning. First of all, though, here's your forecast.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland, but for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
we're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, still to come on today's programme, after successful trials with UK businesses, is a 4-day working week the future? Let us know your views. We'll be discussing it at 6:45.
I mean, we'd all like it, wouldn't we? We'd like it, but what's that going to do for the economy?
Well, there's an argument. It squeezes all your productivity into those 4 days. People don't do any more work when they work a 5-day week, according to this survey.
So
we'll
would you
6:45.
argue then there should be a 4-day working week at school?
They make longer days.
Everybody will go, oh, we can't have that. So if it's good enough for the goose, it's good enough for the gander. If it's going to happen in the workplace, it's going to happen in the school.
Yeah, if you can make the days longer, absolutely. But I actually think it's good for family life.
Oh, I agree, and ban homework.
Yeah.
Ban. I mean, I'm being serious.
Parents don't get a chance to parent their kids anymore.
Yeah.
How many mums and dads get to see their children? They drop them at preschool or nursery at 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
They pick them up at 6 o'clock, both mum and dad. They don't raise their kids anymore. It's brutal. It's so tough on the little ones.
So a 4-day working week would help there, both at school and that in the workplace, you think. Or the whole country will go to pot. Let us know what you think. 8 a.m. speaking to the former Foreign Secretary, Mr. Malcolm Rifkin, as the Prime Minister meets Joe Biden in her first foreign trip.
And you know the usual ways to get in touch. Do so via email and Twitter, and we'll go through as many of them as we can throughout the programme. Now, a new guide that's been produced by the organisation Scottish Health Action on Alcohol Problems says drinking alcohol regularly increases the risk of developing a number of cancers.
Well, the charity says alcohol-related cancers can be reduced through awareness by telling patients about the risks of drinking and helping them reduce how much they do actually drink.
Let's speak now to the oncologist, Carol Sikora, who joins us now to discuss all of this. Look, we know Scotland's reputation with having problems of alcoholism to deal with, so we can assume, therefore, that this organisation have done a very thorough a bit of research. What's your take on their findings?
Well, they're completely correct, and Scotland does have a particular problem with alcohol. It's associated with social deprivation, nothing else to do. Drink beer, get it cheaply from supermarkets, drink heavily, go binge drinking. These are the factors that relate to 5 different types of cancer. Studies all over the world have shown that alcohol is related to cancer. The trouble is separating out the variables, the confounding variables. People that drink a lot tend to smoke, they tend to be obese, they tend to have bad diets, they have low vegetable intake and all that sort of thing. So it's very difficult to separate out these factors in the population. But this report, which is from Scotland, it is really about the problems Scotland has and other poor parts of Britain too. It's not just Scotland. Bad diet and alcohol go together.
And what are those 5 cancers then that are associated, even if it isn't necessarily proven to be specifically alcohol, but, the ones that you're referring to?
Sure. So breast is perhaps the commonest, colon is the second commonest, and that's worrying because these are very common cancers. Then there's liver cancer, there's head and neck cancer, the throat and the oral passages. And then finally, there are a variety of other cancers, there are esophagus, other cancers that are relatively loosely associated. And so it's really trying to find a balance. But the question everyone says is, what's the safe limit of alcohol? And the answer is we just don't know because there are so many other factors involved with alcohol in causing the cancer. The standard thing at the moment is 14 units. Well, I know I drink more than 14 units in a week. A unit is very little, in fact. So half a glass of wine is a unit. And, a gin and tonic is 2.5 units. So you quickly round up in a week 14 units. It used to be 21 for men and 14 for women. Now we're equal. So it's 14 for both of us. And a lot of people drink more than that. But that's not really the level at which Scotland are talking about. They're talking about 50 to 100 units a week.
OK, and are we equal? Breast cancer was the first cancer you listed in that. Can women drink as much alcohol and get away with it in the same way? Or do women need to be more aware of risks from cancer?
it's completely goes across both sexes. There's absolutely no doubt. Cancer Research UK about 10 years ago calculated that for every glass of wine a week a woman drinks, they increase their breast cancer risk by 2%. And that's quite significant. So, there's very few things you can do about cancer, whether you're going to get it or not. Your genes, they're in you. You can't do anything about your family. So that's one thing. But you can look at your diet, you can look at alcohol, you can look at smoking, exercise, and these sort of things. So alcohol is certainly in there. The difficulty is it's also vague. The other thing we don't know, if you stop drinking completely, what happens? Do you suddenly become risk-free from cancer? Clearly not. There's still a risk, but it may be reduced.
OK, Carol, thank you very much indeed. Good talking to you. And a warning there, and something for everyone, casual drinkers, hardened drinkers, seasoned drinkers, to bear in mind the risk between alcohol and cancer.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break. After that, we'll go through the papers this morning. We're joined by David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. We'll see you around the bend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
OK, the time is 25 to 7. We'll bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. The Prime Minister says Vladimir Putin must leave Ukraine and pay proper recompense for his invasion before he can rejoin the international community. Liz Truss is using her first foreign trip as PM to urge the United Nations allies to keep up the pressure on Russia.
The Justice Secretary has met with striking barristers, urging them to return to work in order to get justice moving again. The Criminal Bar Association says demonstrations planned for Thursday have now been paused for a week as discussions continue.
Experiencing good quality sleep is more important than getting the recommended 7 to 9 hours to stay healthy, a study suggests. A team from Liverpool, John Moores University, found that sleeping well could help to prevent falling ill with colds, flu and other respiratory diseases such as COVID-19. Oh, we're doomed.
So that sleeping study is very, very interesting because up until now it was about the duration of your sleep, the length of your sleep and the quality of it, which I certainly could never get 7 hours or whatever. For me, it's about 4 hours if I was lucky. What about you, Isabel?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I need 8 hours sleep. I've always needed loads of sleep. I never get it, hence why I'm always ill. I get every bug going. As soon as there's a bug in my house, bam, I'm wiped out. But it's to do with not getting enough sleep, I'm sure of it.
Well, they're now saying as long as it's quality, it doesn't matter about the duration.
No, I toss and turn and wriggle and worry and never sleep. It's just my life.
OK, let us know your sleeping patterns. If you're up early, seeing us when you should be in bed or vice versa, let us know. OK, David Miller and Claire Muldoon, they're here with their double act today. And you're saying, Claire, you're not going to talk about the Q Gate, Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, and it's all over the front of the pages of the papers.
It's in front of two of the papers.
No, it's not. Look, there's three I've immediately picked up there.
Three
I haven't even gone through the rest.
Strategically placed, eh?
Yeah, I'll tell you what's strategic. Why is Holly fighting to keep her job, according to The Sun, but Mr Philip isn't?
Well, who knows? Twitter last night was saying that she didn't want to vacate her position in This Morning.
Well, neither of them would want to.
Well, who would want to give up £600,000 a year, plus everything else that comes from it? But to be honest with you, I think the brand is very damaged. I think there has to be a change from the top down to the bottom on This Morning, to be honest with you, having worked on the programme.
Yeah.
And for a number of years. And I just think they need a complete clear out. In fact, I think ITV needs a complete clear out.
Well, you're right, this top to the bottom, it's all interconnected.
It is.
The Mirror have a story. Holly and Phil distraught at Royal Q jump ride. But of course, what you've got to understand is the Mirror is literally in bed with ITV. And so they act as a sort of outlet for the ITV press office of disinformation there. So we didn't jump the queue, we were working. Why was your boss there working with you?
Why was she wearing a mask? Is she allergic to the public?
No, she does that, and Holly's in tears, but Holly's always in tears. So she wears a mask. I think she's quite fearful, germophobic. So I think that's what that's about.
Well, look, David Miller, do you think there is a sort of element of bandwagonism about all of this? When you look, David Beckham being hailed as a saint for having queued, and yet he's off to Qatar in a couple of weeks, a country with a terrible human rights record, and he's going to be paid millions of pounds for it. But no one talks about that. Yet Holly and Phil get what lots of broadcasters did, which was a fast track through to the lying in state of Her Majesty the Queen for their job, and they're being lambasted.
But sorry, they said that they didn't
I'm
get
just
a
asking.
No, I'm saying they didn't get a fast track. They say lie. They say they didn't pay the respects to the body. Lie. What else were they there for? I mean, let's just tell the truth about the whole things. They messed up, and instead of being arrogant and saying, "Oh, we were there working as journalists," why don't they just say, yeah, we thought it would be a good idea, as a lot of us would. I mean, I have to say, if you were offered a VIP thing, it would be very, very tempting to do it.
Now, can I just tell you,
yes,
I am here not to discuss trivia. I am on a different plane, OK?
You were the one who brought this up, may I say.
Yeah, but that's off air, you know. But then I donned.
Do you know what?
I donned my statesman-like countenance.
David, let's crack into the Telegraph then and talk about the situation in the Ukraine. We were talking about it just a short while ago.
Yeah, with Robert, and I listened to what he had to say. So we can take this fairly shortly. But what we don't know is how crazy is Putin. What we do know is that Putin has created a whole mass of fanatics, even more fanatical than him, who are now making the running in terms of Russian nationalism of an extreme kind that is bound to lead us to the threshold of some kind of nuclear exchange. Because what seems to be happening is they now, I mean, this is surreal. Lewis Carroll could have written this script. They want to annex a part of Ukraine that they do not control and have no prospects of controlling, in order that they can then say their own territory is being attacked and use nuclear weapons. Now, I'm never quite sure, you know, having some familiarity from the past with nuclear weapons, the thing about nuclear weapons, they're indiscriminate. You know, you drop nuclear weapons on a territory you've just claimed, and it becomes polluted for heaven knows how long to come. You look at what's happened with Chernobyl. But what you've got in the Telegraph is a series of interesting commentaries. One that says Putin is cornered and dangerous. The prospect of a nuclear war is now closer than ever. And while I think it's easy to talk the talk, when it comes to walking the walk, it's going to be more difficult. But Putin is set to declare occupied land part of Russia, although he doesn't occupy it. And there's also an article by the chairman of the Defence Select Committee, which I think has now been reduced to online. They obviously didn't want to depress their readers who only want to know about Holly and whatever. But Putin can't afford to lose. We must prepare for the war to turn even uglier. But I think it's nasty because most people don't actually know what's going on in Russia, including, I suspect, a lot of the commentators. The only thing I would say is that in the good old days, as we like to think of them as, messages are sent, and I hope similar messages are sent, that there are red lines here, and if Russia uses even tactical nuclear weapons... look, Mystic Mellor predicts that every Russian city has got a lot of nuclear weaponry targeted on it from the West.
Has he declared his use of nuclear weapons or his potential use of nuclear weapons?
Yeah, that's what this argument is about. You raise your sights from Holly and you discover that in the real world out there, it's really quite serious because Putin is getting beaten, and Putin cannot cope with being beaten. And so what can Putin do? He can't win a conventional war against Ukraine. He can push a few buttons.
So he needs to escalate it then.
And what did you both make of the fact that there was widespread speculation? We were all on tenterhooks last night thinking he was about to make this address to the nation, the first
and then it was withdrawn.
And then it was canned. Yeah. So, what's going on behind the scenes? And we hear from Robert Fox that he's surrounded by even harder hardliners than him.
I've been having a long chat with Rob. Robert knows, and I think that Putin created this vocal group who are extremely national. I mean, they believe you wave a magic wand and miraculously the age of Stalin returns. It's a dangerous world.
Do you think Putin
relished dangerous world? So I've decided I'm going to escape from this. I'm worried that this reality will drive me mad, so I'm going to immerse myself in Holly and Phil.
You've made your point.
Claire, imagine being in a situation that there are so few NHS dentists around that you would start doctoring your own teeth.
Yeah. There's fillers that you can buy from the pharmacy. We've all done teeth whitening, I think, with home kits, etc. But people are taking it one step further because they can't get access to a dentist. Moreover, they can't access an NHS dentist. So therefore, there's a percentage of the population, quite a sizable one, who are starting to do their own treatments, like pull their own teeth out and stuff like that. So we're getting, I think we're going back, we've gone the post-war Elizabethan age, now we're going back to the Victorian age. This is something out of Charles Dickens, for heaven's sake. And the other thing that's really concerning, for me anyway, is the fact that NHS for dentistry is such a gateway thing. You've got, the health of your mouth often can follow and give evidence to something else that's wrong with your body. People with heart conditions need to have really good teeth. They need to be really well taken care of.
Yeah, if you've got plaque on your teeth, you could get dementia.
Exactly. They've got all these things, but then the NHS is supposed to be there to serve, to treat, to take care of the living well and the living ill. But it's not. And this hasn't been discussed for years since the Conservatives whatever government, I think it was the Conservatives actually, that changed the contracts for NHS dentists. You used to be able to get, as a parent, an NHS dental appointment and your children would be seen in the NHS. Yeah. Then it was changed. Then most parents went private and their children got NHS treatment. But now you can't even get your children to get into a private dentist to get any form of treatment. It's really bad.
What are you saying? The private dentists are oversubscribed?
I don't know what it is. They used to be under the contracts. They used to have a specific number of NHS appointments available, and I think that's been scrapped.
Oh, right, yeah.
So people can't actually access it now.
It'll be a cost thing. You've got the money, you'll get anyway.
I called our private dentist in August for an appointment for my children, and we're seeing them mid-October.
Yeah.
It's a long wait.
It's a long wait. And then because you've got the children, you probably want them at half-term.
So basically, dentistry, there's supposed to be a whole section that's part of the NHS.
Yes.
And you're saying it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not. And it's a gateway to the rest of your physical well-being.
Okay.
It's a really important part.
David, we said earlier, Eamonn and I, on the show, we wouldn't be talking much about the monarchy, but in fact, really interesting bit of diplomacy, soft power coming out from King Charles. And gosh, how important after comments coming from Downing Street about questioning whether President Macron was a friend or a foe.
I'm not a big fan of hers, but she's entitled to do that because Macron plays fast and loose and has behaved badly over a number of issues. However, it appears he gets on very well with Charles. And, the Queen hasn't made a state visit for 7 years. We understand why that was. Charles going to France, which is the suggestion that he'll go for his first state visit to France and then go to Germany. It will do well, because it's interesting. Macron was all over Charles like a rash, and what he said about the Queen, she wasn't only the Queen of England, she was the Queen of France as well, seemed to be an effort on his part to draw back from some of the petulant stupidity that he spent most of the summer engaging in. And I think the soft power of the monarchy is something that I think Charles will be able to deal with, particularly since, and I sense a collective shudder running down this table, he and Macron have similar feelings about green issues. So you have been warned.
Interesting.
Yes.
Do you think in a funny way he's going to, between the softened relationships with the monarchy, do you think he's actually going to strengthen those and become more vitriolic or perhaps more verbose in his own feelings and political as well, and actually give a view of things now? You don't?
I don't.
But according to the Telegraph, Macron's got this idea of putting a 30-mile band of trees across Africa. And I mean, it's a weird idea, but I mean, it's a harmless thing for Macron to be doing, and Charles will apparently be shouldering up alongside him.
Talking to them.
Claire, quick word about this racial violence that's going on in Leicester. We're just not getting huge coverage. I think a lot of people in the rest of the country don't really understand why it's going on. So this is between Hindus and Muslims in Leicester.
In Leicester. And, I've tried to find out the reason why, or why this whole thing kicked off. There is no reason, but I can see a direct correlation between Glasgow, Celtic and Rangers. It was a religious thing that still is, and yet no one is coming out to say anything in criticism of anything apart from Modi in India.
I laughed. Yesterday I was asking someone about lack of coverage on this, and they said, well, we don't want to identify people, we don't want to stir this up. If there was in Belfast a riot, as per normal, there's no hesitation in identifying who's Protestant and who's Catholic in all of this. Why this sensitivity, David, with Leicester?
Well, it's come out of a bit of a clear blue sky, except Leicester is a very multicultural place, and that is, A, a good thing, but on occasions a bad thing, and I think that they're now seeing the worst of it, because we're dealing here not with violence between the indigenous population and the immigrant population, but between branches of the immigrant population, the Hindus and the Muslims. So,
okay, guys, I want you to stay here because we want to hear your views on the next subject, which, Isabel, is about a 4-day week.
It's about a 4-day working week, yes. Something we've talked about on the programme before, with mixed reviews from our followers, I would say, from our audience. But apparently it seems possible that after 86% of those companies who took part in a trial of the 4-day week said they'd actually like to continue going forward with it.
Let's talk to Charlotte Lockhart. Charlotte is Managing Director and founder of the 4-day week global campaign. And so much to talk about, Charlotte. Good morning to you. Charlotte.
Good morning, thank you.
Charlotte, if you work 4 days, does that mean you only get paid for 4 days?
No, we're very specific about this. So we have a principle called 100-80-100. So you are paid 100%. You are requested to reduce your hours by 80% or to 80%, but on the understanding that you're going to produce 100% of the productivity that you were before.
And, how possible is that? I mean, I was reading some background that actually in productivity terms, most people are only actually productive for 3 hours a day. So you could quite easily lop off a day and still have the same net result at the end.
Well, exactly. I mean, by that calculation, you only have to increase your productivity by 45 minutes a day to actually gain yourself a day. But look, the productivity conundrum is an international one, and it is at the heart of why Andrew Barnes started this journey in the first place. He was looking to understand what were the things that got in the way of people being productive in our business at Perpetual Guardian. So, so that's where the journey started. And so what we do with the businesses that join us, whether they be a fish and chip shop or an office or a retail chain, is actually help them understand exactly what productivity truly is. And then they can then look to how they might improve it. And so that's the conversation that we're having. You get all of the well-being aspects from reducing work time, which of course feeds into productivity. But sometimes there's some things you're doing at work that need to change.
So let's get two workers involved in all of this. Claire?
I'm for it. I think it's a great idea. And I think it would help families. I think it would help society.
So agree.
And I think, it's a very positive thing. I think it would help people health-wise as well. Just to have that extra day to, potter around, clean the homes, do things, have longer sleep, have better quality sleep.
Former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I mean, you're just convinced that this would grind Great Britain to a halt?
Yes, definitely, yes.
Lazy?
Well, I think the problem is that there's a deal here which will be easily forgotten. The bit of the deal people will remember is they get an extra day off. The bit of the deal they will forget is that on the 4 days that they're working, they will have to be more productive. And I just don't think the mechanisms exist to ensure that happens.
I think a good model, and I think it's wonderful that you're here to talk to us about this, Charlotte, I think the model would be women working part-time job sharing. And I think if you were to ask any of them, they would say they are under the pressure and they do actually get things done in the time. I think it's a great thing.
They certainly do. And look, this is why we are doing this as a business-led initiative in the first instance, because there are business solutions that need to be factored in. Businesses do need to take responsibility for how they engage with their people and manage productivity in the long term. But there are businesses that have been doing this for quite some time, Perpetual Guardian being one of them, but there are a number of others internationally that have been doing it for time. And so for us, this is about getting companies doing it, getting those learnings and those practices into the workplace, and drawing the work community in.
I mean, you've got to be honest, there will be some who will take advantage of this. Do you not agree? I mean, we talk about the Great Resignation, people not wanting to go back to work after the pandemic. We talk about the snowflake generation, always afraid of a hard day's work. We talk about people going on the razzle-dazzle on a Thursday night and being hungover on a Friday. They'll just change that to a Wednesday night, won't they, if they're only doing a 4-day week? I mean, there will be people who take advantage of this.
But those are the people who are taking advantage of the system that you have now. And actually what the businesses that work on this program find is that it highlights that and it enables them to actually properly manage it. If people are taking advantage in your workplace, it's because you let them.
Yes. Obviously, Charlotte has a delightful Antipodean accent. Has it been tried in Australia or New Zealand? I mean, why are we going to be the first over the top on this?
You're not the first time. You're not.
The 4-day week is now axiomatic.
I love it. We actually have already completed our Irish trial, and we started our US and Canada trial in April, and we didn't start the UK until June. The reason why it makes such good news in the UK is because that you have quite a strong local campaign, the 4-day week UK campaign, and they have been active for quite some time. But this is an economy where we have the most number of companies that want to do this. We are simply meeting a need. Yes, we actually have an Australasian pilot. It starts shortly, and there are already some companies that are on that have joined our other pilots. So that is happening. There are just smaller economies. It makes less of a splash.
Okay.
But the UK economy is the one that has asked for it.
OK, Charlotte Lockhart, we have to leave it there. Really interesting to talk to you. Lots of food for thought. I'm sure we'll get lots of views coming in throughout the morning about that. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in a few moments' time.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland, but for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
President Biden and Prime Minister Truss clash over economics ahead of talks in New York today.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Just after 7 o'clock, Wednesday, 21st of September. Thank you for your company. You've tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel, Webster. And a lot of you keep saying, where is your programme? How do we find your programme? I don't really know how to tell you that, but you get these programme grids, whether it's on Freeview, Virgin, Sky, and it'll say GB News.
And DAB Radio Plus, and there's an app, and you can watch us on YouTube. So, I mean, there's a million gazillion ways.
The DAB Plus is very interesting because if you're listening and you say you've got to leave to get the 7:10 bus or whatever, or get into your car, we're there if you've got DAB Plus. And it's very good. I mean, if I wasn't working, I'd listen to it.
Yeah, we love to keep you company, and this is what's leading our news this morning. The Prime Minister will use a speech at the UN in New York today to tell world leaders that they must prioritise economic growth to combat Russian manipulation of the economy.
Now, this is her first foreign trip as Prime Minister, and she will also hold talks with President Biden, where tensions are predicted to arise around Northern Ireland Protocol and Liz Truss's support for what are called trickle-down economics. The Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg will today set out the details of a major government support package. The plans could cost tens of billions and will also benefit schools, hospitals and charities.
And in Ukraine, separatist leaders in 4 Russian-occupied regions have announced plans to hold referendums on joining Russia, which will start this Friday, while NATO has called the move a sham.
Thank you. Get in touch with us. You've been talking about Ukraine this morning. Jeffrey says Ukrainians were being encouraged to give up their sovereignty to Europe without a referendum, just like we were in 1972, he says.
Lots of you getting in touch on the 4-day working week. Peter in Maidstone says, Isabel suggests there's little difference in productivity, whether one works 4 or 5 days a week. What about making everyone self-employed and see how that affects productivity?
No. Government don't like the self-employed. They don't like that at all.
And
they like everybody on PAYE. And they get, well, don't say there you go. It's an absolute fact. They don't want.
No, it's true.
They don't want anybody being self-employed.
But I think his point was just,
they don't want you to be
once
a gardener or window cleaner or anything else being self-employed. They want you on PAYE, and they can then track you better with that one.
On sleeping, Phil says, I've been a fabulous sleeper all my life. I just close my eyes and I wake up about 6 to 8 hours later. I don't know the secret of it. If I did, I'd sell it to you both. Phil, you are so blessed. If I could have one superpower, that would be it.
Wow.
Good sleep.
No, don't know what that is.
You must be a very good person, good
And thank you for all the people who spoke to me last night on social media. We were talking, we sort of had this little get-together of people who have chronic pain. And there's unfortunately so many of you with so many tales to tell. And hopefully you're not watching us now, you're asleep.
So our top story this morning, Liz Truss will today address the United Nations, where she'll tell the assembled world leaders that economic growth is needed to combat Russia.
All of this coming ahead of a meeting between the PM and Joe Biden. GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey in New York with the very latest. Here he is.
Well, it's the Prime Minister's second day here in New York, and there are kind of 2 key moments to watch out for. First of all is that meeting with the US President Joe Biden. Of course, it was due to take place in Downing Street on Sunday, but that was cancelled and now will be held on the fringes of the United Nations General Assembly. And there really is one issue that's going to dominate, and that is the war in Ukraine, particularly as we all wait to hear what President Putin may well say. But it will be a show of cooperation and of continued support, if you like, for Ukraine from the US and the UK. We heard of that extra commitment in terms of military aids yesterday from the Prime Minister, and I suspect that today, essentially, we will hear the same message from both President Biden and indeed Liz Truss. It is interesting, isn't it, that they are determined to present this united front. And it is, at the second occasion, the main occasion, if you like, for the Prime Minister when she addresses the UN General Assembly later on. All world leaders get a chance to do this once a year, that Ukraine will unsurprisingly dominate that speech as well. She's going to talk about how she says democracies need to harness the power of cooperation since the invasion in order to constrain authoritarianism. And she's also going to say that free countries around the world need to prioritise economic growth and security. That security, not just in terms of military and defence, but also in terms of energy and food supply, in order to win, she says, the new era of strategic competition. And she's also going to continue to commit the UK, and this was announced a little earlier on in the year by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, that there will be 3% of the UK's GDP spent on defence spending by the end of the decade. So Ukraine is the big issue here in town for the Prime Minister and indeed for the UN as it gathers this week. But it is also interesting that lots of the questions of Liz Truss over the last 24 hours, and I'm sure this will continue into today, is what we can expect domestically at home, not just around that extra aid for businesses that we're likely to hear of later on this morning in terms of the cost of living crisis and the cost of energy, but also what we may well hear in that mini budget tomorrow when it comes to tax cuts. Fascinating that on the world stage, as she addresses world leaders for the first time as Prime Minister, that many people at home want to hear what the Prime Minister has in store for them this autumn and winter during that cost of living crisis.
Caffrey for us in New York. And if you were watching a little bit earlier with Robert Fox, we were discussing expected speech from Putin last night. And if you were following the news last night or went to bed expecting that, it didn't happen. Well, in the last few moments, he has made that address now to Russia, and we will get full analysis of that with Robert Fox shortly. But just a few lines from what he's been saying, in a string of accusations and allegations, saying he says Western countries are trying to block any independence and development in order to force their will in brutal ways to other people. The aim of the West is to still weaken and destroy. They are openly saying that. And he said he made Ukrainian people cannon fodder as far back as 2014 when the Crimean Peninsula was annexed. But all of this, of course, absolutely relevant to what's happening at the United Nations in New York. So let's get some more analysis to it all with our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Liz Truss has been absolutely clear, hasn't she, that she believes there needs to be economic strength in order to resist Putin.
She certainly does, and this is her message to the United Nations today, that the free democracies of the world need to cooperate, need to use their economic heft, but also to commit in terms of security guarantees, championing, for example, the AUKUS Pact that was signed not so long ago between the United States, Australia and the UK. Also in her meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan yesterday, emphasising the United Kingdom's desire to join the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, that trading area in the Pacific, that counterbalance to China. Clearly the idea that there is democratic countries that should be more cooperative in the way that they go about the world, but also emphasising that economic growth is a really key lever here in terms of not just being able to put on economic pressure on countries like Russia, but also in terms of being able to fund increases in security spending. And she'll talk today about the 3% target, up from the 2% target, the 3% of GDP target that the UK now has to spend on our armed forces.
And meanwhile, all of this, the backdrop, I suppose, is the relationship with the United States, much being made of the timing of a tweet from President Biden yesterday afternoon with virtually the exact words that I had been talking to you about in the morning, about trickle-down economics in the Thatcher Reagan era. Truss's team very keen to say the timing was just a coincidence, but this was orchestrated, wasn't it?
I think it's reading perhaps too much into it to suggest that that was something other than a domestic tweet from Joe Biden.
In UK papers on Sunday about Liz Truss being aligned with trickle-down Reagan-Thatcher economics.
American politics often talks about trickle-down economics. You'll see it in every presidential debate for the last 40 years. You'll see it in most primary debates as well. I think that it might be a little bit too UK-centric to think that a Twitter account that is run by Joe Biden's domestic team is about a specific meeting that has not yet happened between Liz Truss and Joe Biden. Really, what Biden's handlers are suggesting is going to dominate the conversation between Liz Truss and Joe Biden today is, number one, the Ukraine situation, and number two, the Northern Ireland Protocol situation, much less domestic economic policy.
And just to stress, we will get more analysis and indeed translation of Putin's address shortly. But I just want to ask you about some of the interviews Liz Truss was doing yesterday with British press in New York, making it clear she was willing to be unpopular, that she was happy to go ahead with tax cuts, which could be seen to benefit a small minority of people. But she was clear she believed that arbitrary taxation was no way to improve growth and the crises and the problems that we're facing.
She was, and it was, I suppose, very candid in terms of what she was saying, that yes, some of the policies that will be announced on Friday's mini-budget will not be big retail policies. They will not be populist. But it is interesting to see some of the criticisms that have been levied at the United Kingdom government in the last few years, that it was leaning too much into populism, that it was going by focus group rather than ideology, that potentially some of the tax rises that have happened in the last few years have hit working people as well. Well, all of these are now being reversed, and yet we're seeing similar criticisms. Instead of it being populist, now it's being too unpopular. Instead of raising taxes, now it's cutting taxes, and it does seem to be that at the very least there is candour here and a clear ideological difference between the parties. One saying we need to do everything we can to get growth, and that might mean, yes, the rich will get richer. But on the other hand, people saying that, no, it's redistribution rather than growth that matters so much. It's a clear economic difference.
Excellent analysis as always, Tom. Thank you so much.
The time, 12 minutes past 7. News-wise, this is what's happening. The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is set to unveil details of a government support package to help businesses with energy costs come winter. Ministers say the 6-month scheme will also include schools, hospitals, charities and other non-domestic consumers.
The government's being urged to reinstate the eviction ban during the cost of living crisis. The Kerslake Commission on Homelessness and Rough Sleeping says failing to do so could cause a catastrophic homelessness problem.
Citizens Advice says up to 30% of your energy bill could be going straight out the window due to a lack of insulation. It says over 1 million people living in homes with an energy rating of F will lose £950 worth of heat they pay for through walls, windows and the roof. So President Putin has gone on national television to make an address to the people of Russia, saying that his country's aim is now to liberate the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. Let's get the views of our defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, on this one this morning. What's he been saying, Robert? What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a gambler's throw, and it's a desperate throw, because he's announced a partial, full national mobilisation of forces. And as you picked out that other line, we are going to liberate Donbass. What have his forces been trying to do since the 24th of February? The trouble is, in Donbass, in both principal areas of it, Luhansk and Donetsk, Russian forces currently are being pushed back. I think that this is a loser's throw. He is very worried about the pressure coming from the more extreme people than he, people he invented almost to support him when he took over Crimea, been saying in the Duma, the parliament, now we've got to eradicate Ukraine altogether, Russia under threat. And he's trying to rally the nation. And it sees whether the bits of the nation he wants to recruit for this further drive respond to his call. Because he's held off this for so long. And I think this is a last gasp of some kind.
And just to give people at home a sense of how big a deal this address is, I mean, this is the first time he's done a national address of this sort since the invasion of the war began. As you say, a sign perhaps of how serious things are for their position. And I suppose that concern he has about an uprising from the Russian population if they're seen to lose.
Colour revolutions, like the Orange Revolution that you had in Ukraine years back, early in its independence, for 31 years. Colour revolutions is what the two big dictators, Putin and Xi in China, fear most. Precisely the localised uprising or revolt against Moscow. Remember how huge Russia is, 11 time zones. And out in the east, they've been getting cheap recruits up till now. Now the tide could be turning. There's one other thing, that the one element of NATO he thought he could swing round to supporting his position, because they have a common interest in the Black Sea, is Turkey, President Erdogan. Erdogan let it slip in the last 24 hours. Well, perhaps Crimea should go back to its rightful owner, Ukraine. He's under pressure from all sides. And this is why there must be maximum alert in NATO, because he may do something quite extraordinarily provocative.
Right, meaning what? A nuke on a
tactical nuke
plant?
or a chemical.
Yeah, right.
I mean, into that, because he cannot raise an army to do what he says he's going to do to, in quotes, liberate Donbass.
So is he talking about conscription at the moment? Is that what
Oh,
this
yes,
is about?
and the Duma has
That'll
passed
not be popular, will it?
three laws yesterday saying that, that severe penalties if you refuse to call up, if you refuse to fight in Ukraine, and backing these 4 referenda in 4 areas of Ukraine, not just Luhansk and Donetsk, Donbass, but also Zaporizhia and Kherson.
So what does the West do in response to this? Do we just stand back and take this, or will there be a definitive response?
I think there will be a definitive response, because I think the notes have been exchanged already about nuclear, saying if you are really threatening nuclear, we will respond. That is a note, I believe, of some nature. How they will respond, they are not saying, the Americans have not said, if you use nuclear, we'll use nuclear, but we are going to do something. And I'm very interested in what that something is going to be. 2 key players in this, as we were rightly saying, is locally Erdogan, Turkey, who does seem to have some grip, and he wants talks and says you've got to talk, it's your only way out to Putin. But the other thing is that Mr. Putin is not getting support from President Xi in China. There was a meeting last week in Samarkand of the Eastern powers, and it was amazing that Putin was asked by his local allies there, please explain yourself. What's going on with this war in Ukraine? Why aren't you winning? And for the first time, Putin had to say in public it was a war and it wasn't going well.
Well, look, if people are just waking up, just tuning in, I just want to remind people at home, this breaking news at this hour then, that much anticipated address to the nation from President Putin has now taken place. We were expecting it last night. It was widely thought to have been cancelled. And then in the last few moments, it has just concluded. A couple of lines to bring you from the translation of that recorded address to the nation, which I should point out is the first time he has done so since the outbreak of war. He says the main aim of freeing the people of the Donbass region remains without change. He wants to support people aiming to hold referendums in Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine. This is sovereign territory that we're talking about. And he goes on to talk about partial mobilization. A decree on this has already been signed. Only those who are in reserves will be conscripted, but it will begin from today. So significant developments.
Yeah.
And I suppose the timing in all of this...
He says our aim is to liberate Donbass. I ordered government to give legal status to volunteers fighting on Donbass.
Eamonn and Isabel, he said very ugly, the West is out to destroy our country, meaning Russia. He is ratcheting, this is a desperate man. He's ramping it up, he's ratcheting it up, and he's got potentially 1 million reserves, but, that they can't even train those that are going to the front, the cannon fodder already. And they've had to bring in units. The last really big unit, a parachute brigade, small division, has been pulled back from Syria. They've been trying to recruit from the Wagner group, we've heard a lot about, and it's a dud. It really hasn't produced the stuff. For Zelensky, whose troops are tired, I mean, they've been fighting, a lot of them, for 6 months. It is a really big test. But somebody said the next 90 days is decisive, and oh boy, it's proving that. Can I add just one other thing about that address? It wasn't live. It was recorded. And that is pretty significant in itself. Well, where is he?
Yeah.
I mean, I won't tell you, the Twitter feed has gone berserk on the fake news this morning. So did somebody actually put a metaphorical pistol to his head and say, you'd better get in and we're at war and we're going to survive? These people who've been so noisy in the parliament saying, we must fight, we must call up all the forces that we have, we must destroy. They use this awful term, we must destroy Ukraine, we must destroy Ukraine. There's a big churn going on in Moscow and Petersburg now.
We talk a lot about the timing of this in terms of, him feeling like he's beginning to lose ground in this war, but also the fact that the UN General Assembly is taking place. There's been lots of focus. I mean, it's top of the agenda there. He doesn't like it when that happens, does he?
He should be there.
He should be there, but
and he's called into question the whole system. Oh no, not the whole system. Far from it. One of the main points of the UN. Can you really have a rogue member, permanent member of the Security Council? So whenever the Security Council, which does a lot of the enabling, saying, oh, we're going to do a peacekeeping operation or even a rescue mission where you have this negativity. Sadly, it's a very serious moment for Russia too.
Got to leave it there, Robert. Thank you very much indeed. Serious developments there in that Russian-Ukraine war. We'll take a break, back with sport after that.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland, but for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Look, just bearing in mind events in Russia at 8 o'clock this morning, we're going to be speaking to former Foreign Secretary Malcolm Rifkind after President Putin made his address in the past few minutes, so escalating the whole situation in Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll also at 8:45 this morning be talking to Strictly star Ola Jordan about conceiving using IVF and the complexities of having children while keeping up your career.
And please let us know your views on everything. You know how to do what to do to get involved in the conversation. Look forward to hearing from you. Okay, back pages of the papers. Let's get a look at those. It's a dire state, says the Star newspaper. Spurs defender Eric Dyer has banned his family from going to away games amid continuing fan abuse. Apparently things are getting much worse on that front. Qatar failing to reform, according to The Guardian. World Cup stadium workers still toil in debt and squalor 2 months before the opening of the games. The Times, bribery and deceit. It has an exclusive on how Taekwondo bribed its way into the Olympics. Paul Coit now to talk to us, and it's cricket you want to bat off with.
Well, I think it may be a good idea. First game in Pakistan that England have played in 17 years. T20 went very well.
Security's massive.
It is, yeah. And it's been a great success. It's been a real success. There's going to be 7 games over there. So the first one went very well, and England came through as well. It's that old sporting phrase, a team in transition. Owen Morgan, who was the captain, has left, and now it's gone to Josh Buttler, and he was injured, and Moeen Ali captained the side. So they beat Pakistan by 6 innings. Went very well. And the thing is, we talk about Football World Cup. T20 World Cup comes up next month as well. So 7 games over there. Then off to Australia for the T20 World Cup. There's
International Nations League football coming ahead as well. That begins tonight. You've got Scotland in action.
Scotland are in action against Ukraine. So, of course, they played them only recently. That was in June when Ukraine beat them in the qualifier for the World Cup, and then Wales ended up beating Ukraine. But Scotland play Ukraine, and it's Nations League, which is going on at the moment. So Scotland, it's very important for them to do well because it's pretty much a backdoor entry, if we can call it that, to get into the Euros in 2024, which they did last time. So it's very good for them so they need to win and they need to qualify. They've got 2 other games coming up as well. England will be playing on the 23rd. They're playing in Italy, so playing against Italy, and then playing against Germany at Wembley. See, the thing is, though, we've got the World Cup coming up. Nations League, the whole idea of the Nations League is to make it more interesting and make it more competitive instead of friendlies, but with the World Cup round the corner. You know, do you really want to be playing really competitive games? I don't think so. So it's more
a lot of players injured, isn't there?
Yeah.
And players worried about getting injured so close to the big tournament itself.
Yeah, of course.
So the calendar for the 2023 Formula One season has been announced. What's different there?
24 races now. It's gone up from 22 to 24.
Wow.
They're adding more and more because, you know, this Drive to Survive show, which is on Netflix.
Very popular.
Huge. And so it's got great new interest now in F1. So there's so many more fans. So they're thinking, great, we'll put more races on. Let's move from 22 to 24. Christian Horner, who is the principal at Red Bull, he's saying, look, we're right at the limit now. We can't go any more than 24 because, I mean, it's a glamorous life, but it's a tough life because obviously around the world, Bahrain it starts 5th of March, ends in Abu Dhabi on the 26th of November.
So there are going to be new races in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Qatar's coming back, and China's going to be there.
Yeah, and Monaco, which was in doubt. I mean, how can you have F1 without Monaco?
So that's out.
They have decided it is in. So it's now in from up to 2025.
Gosh.
But there were doubts whether it would be in there.
Because it's a different type of race.
But also, the thing is with the Monaco Grand Prix, it's got to the point, I mean, it's been there since the start of F1. Very exciting, but it's not a very exciting race now because of the roads being so small and so twisty-turny. It's very difficult to overtake.
Yeah.
So You've driven there. Yeah, you know what it's like.
I have driven around Monaco.
I can imagine around Monte Carlo. The scarf, open-top car.
It's very funny. There was the scarf, the open-top car, the whatever, some sort of Ferrari or whatever. And
Some sort of Ferrari.
My wife was most insistent. You're not going to be driving this. This is when we were doing a film.
Yeah.
You're not going to be driving this. I look like a woman who can't drive a Ferrari, whatever it is. I'm going to be driving this. I said, fine, off you go.
Yeah.
So she gets into this car, whatever, and the official comes over and said, could I see your license, please, ma'am? And she went, license? License? I don't have a license. So you can't drive the car then. Was
she in prison in Monaco for a few years? How long was that?
She forgot to bring it with her.
Oh,
it was brilliant, so I then had to drive the car.
And were you brilliant, by the way, around the course?
It was a bit nervous about how tight those roads were and those hairpins and various things. The big, expensive car.
Especially when you're in a car like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But chess is more my thing.
Now, listen, chess.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, Magnus Carlsen is the world champion. Now, he's played a guy, 19-year-old American called Hans Niemann. Now, there's a lot of accusations of cheating that are going round. How you actually cheat in chess...
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't played chess for a very long time. So the first game, they played 2 weeks ago. Carlsen pulls out of the tournament after he was beaten by the 19-year-old.
Right.
And it was like, well, why? What is it? Is there any reason for this? Then they play the day before yesterday. So Carlsen... Then, after 2 moves, so you've got the kid Niemann actually goes first.
Yeah.
Carlsen, the world champion, makes his move. Niemann goes again, and then Carlsen walks away and says, I'm not going to play anymore. Now, again, there's allegations of cheating. People are trying to find out how.
Oh, yeah.
But the stuff that is being mentioned, and funny enough, Elon Musk is the one that's put this out there. So how true this is that there are beads involved. And when I say beads, put it this way, the chess players, or whoever it was shifting uncomfortably during the game. Now, I don't know whether they are remote controlled, because if they need to be hidden away somewhere, if you follow me.
So there's a bead inside the chess man, and someone's remote controlling moving it, or shaking it, or...
It's like, well, you want to move here and you want to move there. This are the rumours that are going on.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strange situation. So how this is actually working, how he's cheating, if there is cheating going on, but there's something on at the moment.
You couldn't make it up.
You could, well.
Unless you have.
I have absolutely not.
Very good.
I am shifting uncomfortably, as I'm saying to you, but it's nothing to do with that.
Checkmate, mate. You're out of the game. That's it. Thank you very much indeed. Paul Coit there. We'll take a break after that.
We're going through the papers, joined by David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. We'll get some analysis from them as well on that breaking news and that address from President Putin.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
OK, it is coming up to 20 to 8. Time to go through the papers now with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. And I think only fitting, really, given events in the last half an hour, that we get some thoughts on what on earth Putin is up to with this pre-recorded address. We were expecting it to be a live address, David Mellor, to the nation last night. We thought it had been canned altogether, and now it's come out as a pre-recorded session, which we can see here. Robert Fox, the defence editor at The Standard, suggesting, you know, where is this? Why wasn't it live? Is he in some sort of bunker already, or was he forced to make this address?
Yeah, I think that's the point. Once a dictator is forced to record his thoughts, it suggests he has to have his thoughts approved by others before they can go out. It's a very peculiar address because, of course, liberating the Donbass, and there is a problem on the borders of Ukraine and Russia, because it was always part of Russian policy to cede other parts of the Soviet Empire with Russians in order to try and keep them honest. And so in the Donbass area, you've got a majority of Russians, and that's what they also relied upon in Crimea. But the point is, they had every opportunity to capture the Donbass, and they failed to do it. So now they are annexing land they do not control. Is that, the question would have to be, I mean, is that a preparation to an attack that would involve either the use of chemical or nuclear weapons? Now, it doesn't seem a very friendly act to the people of the Donbass, who you wish to liberate, to actually drop either nuclear or chemical weapons on them. But you sense desperation with Putin, you sense irrationality, and it suggests to me the world is entering into quite a dangerous moment.
Yeah, well, he said in that address that he had the right to use nuclear weapons, Claire, and the British government have this morning, doing some media interviews, reacted to what he was saying they've accused Putin of rewriting history. They say the language is concerning. They should take this very seriously, his comments about nuclear weapons, and they considered this to be a grave escalation.
I think indeed it is. I think it's very grave. I think we're sitting here this morning. All the news channels are covering this now. This is a global, unprecedented attack on the world, actually. And, you know, we've got Putin holding all the keys again. So what's the solution? What's the answer? I mean, you know, where does the UN General Assembly
It's not because
go
Putin holds the keys. It's because he doesn't that he's doing this. Now, Putin is probably playing a dangerous game. He thinks people are still frightened of him. He thinks if he threatens to push a few buttons, then the weeds in our little garden, Germany, France, will kind of run away. But at the end of the day, no one can afford to run away from Putin because, of course, if he gets away with this, then it will only get worse. In the older days with which I was familiar, messages were sent that were never made public about what the consequences would be of certain things being done. I would be astonished if messages were not being sent to Putin that the consequence of him using either chemical or nuclear weapons would be devastating. Because, you see, this mutually assured destruction, the theory on which all these things rests, you don't have to have equality of power in order to have mutually assured destruction. The theory was, however rickety the Russian system was, they could still blow us apart. Whether that remains the case, I wouldn't care to want to try. But one thing is absolutely certain. The West has enormously more nuclear power than, and could pretty much, you know, if they said, look, I tell you what, we'll prove what we can do, we'll blow up the Kremlin in the next 30 seconds, they could do so. But we don't want it to get to that. But, you know, Putin is basically, look, it's like a gambler going into a casino. He's got one last dice to roll, and that's his fortune. If he rolls it, No, the consequences.
Well,
could be
it's literally Russian roulette. Yeah, but this, exactly. This time last year, we were sitting saying that Putin was playing a really dangerous game of cat and mouse, and no one for 1 minute thought he would invade Ukraine. And yet, 12 months later, we are. But this is a grave escalation of events.
Well, I suppose it puts the Biden-Truss meeting into sharp focus today. That will be happening on the fringes of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Brexit row, Northern Ireland Protocol, all considered part of their meetings, but surely this has got to be top of the agenda.
Yes, there's the Brexit row because of Biden. You wouldn't think of Biden as being, emerald green, but Biden's policies are very much geared to what he thinks in the best interests of Ireland. And also, the front page of The Guardian, Biden rejects PM's embrace of Reaganite tax policies because, of course, when Margaret Thatcher was a Reaganite, it helped her quite a lot that Reagan was actually the president.
Yeah.
Now that he isn't, Reaganite policies can be seen as provocative. What I find sad about Biden is that he doesn't seem to appreciate that the real threat to the Good Friday Agreement is actually European meddling, forcing Northern Ireland into rejectionist positions. Well, you know far more about this than I do, Eamonn. As long as everything was paddling along quite nicely and no one felt threatened, that was all right. But if, for instance, the Democratic Unionists feel threatened by a lot of this stuff, that's when the trouble will begin. And she's got to make an effort to try and persuade Biden that the best way to preserve the Northern Ireland peace process is not to have provocations like the Europeans insisting on opening every box of this or every tin of that.
I agree.
That's pathetic.
It is. It really is pathetic. Absolutely.
I mean, typical of people, people like, run by Luxembourg or whatever, people who know nothing about Northern Ireland. But they know how to meddle.
You can sell a Marks and Spencer sandwich in Leeds, but you can't sell it in Lisbon.
I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, but then you see that is another sign. Dear Boris, bless him, he looks a bit disconsolate, Boris. He'd love to be in there making a mess of things instead of being on the fringes. But I tell you something, Boris was the one who would have said, let's give them what they think they want, but then we'll move on. But by giving them, the Europeans, what they think they want, he has empowered them to sell sandwiches in Leeds, but not in Lisbon, and that's not very clever, actually.
He didn't think that they would actually go through with all these finer details and be bothered with them.
Well, Boris never dealt with details anyway, so he thought they would be the same.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
The briefing notes that he would have got, he probably didn't get beyond the second paragraph, when it probably said, by the way, Prime Minister,
Let's turn our attention to what's been happening in Leicester. The Mirror have this on page 27. The elders have been uniting from both camps. This is from the Muslim and from the Hindu community.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, de-escalate tensions there. Is it working?
It's not working. I covered it in the first news review, and then I came off and someone had tweeted, thanks for covering it, because it's not being covered in the papers, and also it's happening in Birmingham. And I likened it to the Catholic-Protestant divide in Glasgow. We have here a divide in religion that's been escalated, they would say, through a really serious, divisive nature of social media. These are planned attacks between both factions. But because, unlike the Catholic Church and the Protestants, they have got leaders of one side and the other who would come out and condemn it at all levels, it seems to me that the Muslims and the Hindus don't have one particular head of the religions that they can actually look to, get guidance from, take instruction from. And I think this is a free-for-all. It is a racial. It's racial, very, very tense in Leicester, and it's going to go over into probably Leeds, Bradford and Birmingham, and stoke a lot of tension within these racial communities.
And do you think in many ways we've all had our eyes off the ball for good reason? We've been, officially mourning Her Majesty the Queen, but this has been bubbling, and suddenly we're all questioning where this has come from.
And they're saying it's coming from a cricket match in Dubai.
In India as well.
So, I mean, I think when it gets to this level, when it gets to this escalated level of tension, of rivalry, of clashes, it has to be formed by, fueled by something other than sport. I mean, or religion. This is just people who just want to fight one another.
David, let's talk about gas prices, shall we? This is on page 4 of the Mail. They are expected to make announcements today on support for business. That's Jacob Rees-Mogg. And you've chosen, actually, the headline in the Mail saying the state will pay a third of gas bills for firms and households. Of course, the state doesn't have any money of its own.
That's
it means
the point.
taxpayers.
Only what they confiscate off us. Liz Truss presents herself as a real Conservative. However, real Conservatives save money and then they let the public have some of that money back because they say we don't need to confiscate as much of your money as we thought we would. Here is Mr. Rees-Mogg, allegedly a right-wing personage. He certainly presents himself as a right-wing personage. The state, says the Mail, will pay a third of gas bills for firms and households. Now, look, we threw money around like water during the pandemic. Every time there was a problem in the Boris Johnson premiership, he threw money at it, which was why my line always was, Boris isn't a Conservative, Boris is a tax and spend Labour man. And now, if we start subsidising, well, according to this story, more than a third of the cost of gas bills for firms and households, where's the money coming from? Where there's no money mine under Whitehall where you just dig a little deeper and out it all comes. And she, she's got very little time to turn this whole thing round, or she will lead the Conservatives to a humiliating defeat.
Yeah.
And the way she'll do it is by losing control of public expenditure.
Just explain to us, David, because, of course, Parliament went into recess whilst this period of mourning was going on. We've got conference season beginning end of next week, so they will break again for that. Do we need parliamentary approval for these announcements? We've got the business announcements today. We've got further announcements tomorrow, I think, on the NHS. And then on Friday, we've got this mini-budget from Kwasi Kwarteng.
Yeah.
How much of this needs to be analysed in the Commons and the Lords?
Well, the answer is quite a lot doesn't, because, of course, it's powers they already possess, They choose to increase tax to, what was it under Labour when I first got into politics, 98% on unearned income.
Gosh.
If we're going to sort of lurch back into history, they can do that at the stroke of a pen. But I think that, I hope as she flies back and forth to America and does all these big things, Liz Truss will think, I am no longer a rhetorician. I'm someone who's got to actually make this work in practice. Not much sign of it at the moment, I'm afraid.
Claire, let's talk about the Mccanns and their pain after they lost that legal battle yesterday against a Portuguese detective who accused them of being involved in their child's disappearance.
Well, this was a 16-year-old battle or something against... they were made aguilo, people of suspects, which is a Portuguese term, people of interest, in the case of the missing Madeleine, their daughter. But I think we all share, well, I certainly do share David's views on the EHCR system.
Yeah.
And, I don't think they're fit for purpose. And although this is a 13-year legal battle, and although this has happened, they have lost now. We took action for one reason, said Kate and Jerry Mccann, and only one reason. To Mr Amaro's unfounded claims were having a detrimental impact on the search for Madeleine. But that's why they did it.
You see, I feel so sorry for them. I really do. It must be terrible being Kate and Jay. If they had rung me up and said, David, what do you think? I would have said, keep clear of the lawyer.
Yes.
Lawyers are no good to man or beast. And I'm a lawyer.
You speak as one.
Yeah.
Speak as one.
Yeah.
Basically, no one thinks that Kate and Jerry murdered that little girl.
Well, you say that.
So,
I've got so many tweets. We broke the news at the ACR.
So why are they... Well, I mean, they're nutcases, aren't they? Maybe, and all of them have obviously got your email address, but basically, you wouldn't have even got mine. But basically, what we're trying to say here is no one believes they were behind it. So what some hopeless, useless, failed Portuguese detective said doesn't matter. What matters is pinning Christian Bruckner. At the moment, he's in prison for a rape of some elderly lady.
He's denying all allegations.
Of course he would, wouldn't he? And basically, if he gets out, that will be the big defeat. And I don't think it was worth chucking money away on a libel action about allegations that most people have forgotten anyway.
But Eamonn made the point yesterday. He said any parent that was accused of having a hand in killing their own kids, you'd sue. You just would. And I
don't think I would. I really don't think I would.
Not? No, you see, I think you just...
I really wouldn't.
You think, so what?
God
this
forbid
failed
ever in
man
that position. And I say it again, and I stand by it in spite of some of the tweets I got yesterday. Like you, David, I feel so sorry for Kate and Joe McCann, and they will carry that with them every day. And their other children.
You know?
Awful. The whole family.
It's ruined their lives.
It has.
Totally.
But I don't think court cases help it, and they've got 30 days before they can actually attempt to appeal against this latest.
How would they even afford that?
And I really, because the fund that was brought up, but I really hope they don't take it any further. Just leave it.
OK, that's interesting. We would normally say your views welcome, but they're not really. Well, they're not. They're not, are they?
Not unless they're positive.
As David pointed out, no official body outside Portugal suspects
no police officer in the UK.
Any mishaps between. I mean, there may be things that morally you could say they should have done, but they don't need to be told. They know what they've got to live with. They don't.
Now, I wish to make a dignified protest. There's too much news. I didn't come on to work as hard as
right.
I know there is. Right. I'm quite enjoying this.
World wars.
Well,
sectarian violence in the UK.
8 minutes now before 8 o'clock. Thank you, David and Claire. I'll be back in 40 minutes' time. 90-year-old man from Kent is going to be sentenced this morning after he was found guilty of stabbing his wife of 60 years last September.
Yeah, he said he did this because he could no longer cope with caring for her. And Paul Hawkins is outside the Old Bailey for us for the sentencing today. Paul, remind us some of the details of this awful case.
Morning, Isabel. Yes, it is an awful case. This is Edward Turpin, 90 years old, from Orpington in Kent. He was found guilty of stabbing his wife, Joan, his wife of 60 years, who is blind. The technical charge was recklessly wounding her on the 22nd of September last year. The jury reaching a majority verdict after 11 hours of deliberation. They cleared him, though, 2 weeks ago of attempted murder and wounding with intent. Now, they accepted that he could no longer care for his wife, who was blind and also needed a catheter. She had become increasingly dependent on her husband, who in court said that he stabbed his wife in an attempt to calm her down and make her stop screaming. He then turned the knife on himself before making a 999 call and telling the operator, "I don't want to stop the bleeding, we want to die." Now, he also said in court that they'd been happily married for 60 good years before the incident, and that he still telephones her twice a day, even since he was found guilty. He added, "What's the good of me causing my wife serious harm? I've got no one, no brothers, no sisters, no aunts, no uncles. Without my wife, I'm finished." He told the court, "I just love my wife, and when you get married, for better or for worse, okay, if it turns out it's a bit worse, I'll carry on." Now, the maximum sentence he could receive is 5 years, but one would have thought the defence will ask to factor in mitigating factors such as his age, he's 90 years old, his health, his vulnerability, and the fact that he didn't intend to hurt his wife. But sentencing will take place later this morning, and we'll find out then.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We're just looking... Terrible story. In Ukraine, this morning from Russia, President Putin has made an address to the Russian people about his wish to make strides within Ukraine, and a lot of reaction from you on that. I mean, this is serious stuff, Isabel. I mean, this is bordering. He reserves his right to use nuclear weapons involved in all of this. The West has got to respond to this as well. Malcolm says the warmongers, NATO and the Americans and the British are hyping up the tension. And then we've got another one said, "You're so wrong in your reports in Ukraine. Russia was helping the people of Donbass against the Ukraine, who were bombing them since 2014. You know, there's so much propaganda in all of this, and people often just want to contrarily believe the opposite opinion on things.
Well, Derek has said nuclear war in Europe now seems almost inevitable. Russia and USA will never fire directly on each other. Look, it's a really confused picture. It's a worrying situation. British government this morning calling it an escalation. And President Putin, as Eamonn was saying, has claimed the right this morning to use nuclear weapons and is calling for a referendum in 4 parts of Ukrainian sovereign territory. Full analysis for you. We've got the Foreign Secretary, Malcolm Rifkind, for that. He'll also be reflecting on what's happening in New York with the United Nations General Assembly there with Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, and Joe Biden, President of the United States, due to meet a little bit later this afternoon. That's all after your forecast.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland, but for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Vladimir Putin announces new mobilization of troops in an address to the Russian people.
A very good morning to you. It is 8 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 21st of September. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
That address from President Putin in the last hour. Russian president has made a televised address to the people of his country saying that their aim is now to liberate the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine.
He also confirmed that he is mobilizing more troops. Well, this all comes as the United Nations meet in New York. Prime Minister Truss will use a speech today to tell world leaders that they must prioritise economic growth to try and combat Russia and its manipulation of the economy.
The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, will today set out the details of a major government support package. The plans could cost tens of billions and will also benefit schools, hospitals and charities.
So fast-paced breaking news this morning. We love to know your thoughts, get your reaction. We'll try and reflect as much of that as we can throughout the programme. Get involved in the conversation, you know how.
So the big news within the last 45 minutes is that the Russian president has made a televised address saying that his country's aim is now to liberate the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine.
Putin also announced a partial military mobilisation in Russia that starts today, with Russia's defence minister saying 300,000 reservists will be called up.
Well, for more on all of this, let's get the view, first of all, of the Foreign Secretary, former Foreign Secretary, Sir Malcolm Rifkind, in all of this. Sir Malcolm, what do you make of what you're hearing?
I think the first point that one must be clear about is that this is another humiliation for President Putin. First of all, to have any mobilization at all, including of reservists, is an admission that he's losing the war, that he hasn't got adequate troops, and also that he has not been able to persuade people to volunteer to join the forces, because they've been trying desperately, including trying to persuade convicts in the prisons to join the army in order to reduce their sentences. So that's all obviously been a farce, and this is now what we're facing.
To you that a humiliated Putin is a dangerous Putin, and he said in that address this morning, which we should...
dangerous even before he was humiliated.
Well, I know, but this is like... Yes, go on.
It's a complete disaster from the moment the war began, because he was forced to withdraw from Kiev, the capital, which he thought he was going to take in a few days. He now has lost virtually the whole of the Kharkov Oblast, and he's now having to call out more troops because he knows his existing army is losing every day. That is very bad news for him.
Sir Malcolm, let's join the conversation. We've got our political correspondent Tom Harwood in the studio, and we've got the defence editor at the Evening Standard, who we'll hear from first of all. That's Robert Fox. What do you think, Robert?
Well, I'm amazed. I don't want to play the body language and is he ill game, but he does look under strain. And as you rightly emphasised, Isabel, this was recorded. So I think there's a bit of a hint of somebody telling him what to say. And in the statement, going on for where Sir Malcolm has rightly pointed out how badly prepared and deployed the Russian army is, that he's emphasised the need for training, and the training of the extra forces that they've been feeding in ever since the late spring has been absolutely hopeless. And they've got no trainers. We know that. They put raw recruits into the battle area where they've got nobody around to train them, because a lot of the original formations, which are called BTGs, battalion tactical groups, have been smashed up, and very few are in the original form that they were last February. So while you're trying to fight, it's very difficult to train raw recruits. And Putin seems to be half admitting that in this speech today.
Interesting to analyse his speech, but also, Tom Harwood, to analyse the response of the British government so far. We know a huge number of them, of course, gathered in New York. But any words in response to this breaking news in the last 45 minutes?
Not yet from number 10. I suppose we will hear more words. Of course, the Prime Minister, it's a little bit early in New York right now, probably asleep. But we are expecting an address from the Prime Minister of the United Nations General Assembly later on today. No doubt the words of that address will now be updated, will now be changed to take account of this new situation. We did know that what Liz Truss was going to say was going to focus on Russia's aggression, on what Number 10 has now been consistently calling Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, using that very strong language, trying to create a broader global coalition, and those wavering countries, India and China, trying to bring them more into the fold with the free and democratic West than in the orbit of Russia.
Sir Malcolm, if you were there in New York at the United Nations at the moment and you've got access to President Biden, what happens next? Does the UK need to consult with him? Should they consult with him? Would it be wise to consult with a dual front or declaration on all of this? What do you think, putting your Foreign Secretary hat on, what do you think is happening there now?
Well, what the United States and the United Kingdom are the two firmest friends of Ukraine. Ukraine has many allies throughout Europe, but in terms of providing practical support, military equipment, military training, the United States is obviously in the lead. The United Kingdom is very much second, as President Zelensky was good enough to acknowledge. So I think there will continue to be very close coordination. I think what's also clear is there's a huge amount of intelligence that the United States in particular, but also other countries, are able to obtain about Russian troop movements. And that is what has helped the Ukrainians in their response. They're doing the fighting, but they're doing it with the help of equipment from other countries, but also intelligence. And intelligence is crucial, particularly nowadays when you can see from the air any significant movement of Russian troops on the ground. That is, I think, part of the practical cooperation that is actually helping the Ukrainians take the offensive and begin recovering territory they should never have been
forgive me, Malcolm, for
in the past.
Interrupting. Can I just follow on with that? Absolutely right. And one of the things that we correspondents have not been following nearly enough, this is the first big digital war that Europe has seen. And as you rightly say, the information aspect, ISTAR, the targeting technology, the electronic warfare, and the contribution of US, and rightly, as you've pointed out, UK, has been enormous. And it's given, in so many aspects, on the ground, it has given the Ukrainians the cutting edge. Because, as you say, they can see, they can anticipate. That's why Russia, currently, as we're speaking now, is very nervous about what's going on in and around Crimea.
So, Malcolm Rifkin?
We lost him.
Yeah, no, you've got me. If you're wanting me to add to that, I'm very happy to do so, because what is now credible is that it will be slow, but the Ukrainians now have a prospect of encircling the Russians in Kherson. They've already blocked the Russians from reinforcing Kherson, which is in the south, near Crimea, near the coast. And that will also mean yet another part of occupied Ukraine. I think slowly, it will take weeks, possibly even months, but will slowly be recovered by the Ukrainians. And I very much endorse the point that has been made by my colleague on your program, that the inability of the Russians to actually train the people they've got means that the Ukrainians will not have to face these new reservists being brought back. Some of them, if they bring out all the reservists, some of them will be quite elderly people, but let's assume they concentrate on the younger ones. These are not professional soldiers. These are people who have served a national service in Russia, as everyone has to do for a period of time. And they will both be very hostile to being brought back with the prospect of being killed or injured, but they also will be way out of training, and both physically, I suspect, as well in the military sense. So it will be months before they could even begin to have any impact on the conflict. I think Putin knows that, but he's got to actually demonstrate that he's doing something more to at least theoretically give the Russians a better chance of recovering the offensive.
This address, Sir Malcolm Rifkin, being described as a significant escalation, the language being taken extremely seriously, Putin reserving the right to use nuclear weapons will be hugely alarming to people waking up this morning. Do you think we are one step closer to a possible nuclear war? I mean, just a few weeks ago...
No, I think that remains as unlikely as it was 24 hours ago. Putin has always been willing to use this sort of blustering language. But, you know, not only would nuclear weapons risk a response with nuclear weapons, because the United States in particular could not just ignore that, and Putin will be aware of that. But he would also entirely lose the support of China and India and other countries in Africa and Asia who have tried to remain more neutral in these matters, because the last thing they want is this crisis. We saw just a few days ago, India and China trying to say to Putin, we have concerns about what's going on here. This war shouldn't be continuing. Now, if they're saying that already, you don't need me to say how hostile they would be, any suggestion of using nuclear weapons if that came from Moscow.
Okay. Sir Malcolm, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Malcolm Rifkin, there, former Defence and former Foreign Secretary in the UK government.
Yeah, and our thanks as well to Robert Fox, Defence Secretary at the Evening Standard, and Tom Harwood as well. With the time at 8:10, let's bring you up to date on the other breaking news this morning. The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is set to today unveil details of a government support package to try and help businesses with those energy costs this winter. Ministers say the 6-month scheme will also include schools, hospitals, charities and other non-domestic consumers.
The government is being urged to reinstate the eviction ban during the cost of living crisis. The Kerslake Commission on Homelessness and Rough Sleeping says failing to do so could cause a catastrophic homelessness crisis.
Citizens Advice says up to 30% of your energy bill could be going straight out of the window due to a lack of insulation. It says over 1 million people are living in homes with an energy rating of F. That means they'll be losing £950 worth of their heat they pay for through the walls, windows and the roof. We've got to think about that. Is that you? You know, do we need to be investing, all of us, in not only woolly jumpers, woolly socks,
but double glazing,
but the double glazing, and as you pointed out earlier, good old-fashioned heavy curtains.
Yeah,
I do love them. There's something really cosy about them. Snuggle in.
Comes about, pull them across.
Get your slippers
the
on.
Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg is set to announce a cap on energy prices for businesses. This has been long called for. That could cut the rates they pay by up to half.
Yeah, absolutely vital. The announcement will include support for companies, but also for charities and public sector organisations. This will be for 6 months from the 1st of October, after the government earlier announced a multi-billion-pound support package to limit the bills for households.
Well, the GB News reporter, Theo Chikumba, joins us live now from Sevenoaks in Kent to talk about small businesses. You've been looking at them there, and how do you think they're responding?
Yeah, well, so good morning to you both. So just before we came on air, I spoke to one small business just around the corner from here who were hoping to hear a bit later on. And they were saying their bills have tripled in the last year, with energy bills going up more than they anticipated. As you say, this scheme we're expecting, we did get some detail of this on the 8th, just a couple of weeks ago, and this scheme is set to last about 6 months, and then it's going to be reviewed again in 3 months, and then after that they'll be looking at which businesses need the most support. But as you know, it's been a challenging year for businesses, and what they're looking for is for more detail on how they can plan ahead from this summer into the winter and into next year. Some businesses have already had to make some difficult decisions, whether it's increasing prices of their products in their shops, making their work cohort smaller, or even shutting down completely. So they're looking at this announcement at 9 a.m. We're expecting around 9 a.m. the Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg will spell out those details and the support that they're giving. As we know, we heard some of that support being offered to households a couple of weeks ago with the Ofgem price cap, but we're seeing potentially an equivalent system or scheme this time around for businesses who really need it. But it's those businesses who rely heavily on energy who'll be looking at this saying, how is this going to help us? And hopefully we'll have some of those answers after around 9 a.m. this morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, whilst we have Tom Harwood still in the studio, let's get some of his expert analysis and all of this, because it feels a little bit like a blizzard of policy announcements after we've had this kind of long period of nothing.
Yes, it's certainly, this was always the plan of the Truss administration back in that first week. Of course, we saw the ground being hit running. First the cabinet appointments, then the announcement on freezing energy bills for households and businesses, and then it all ground to a halt, of course. This plan that was then going to see an emergency budget or something quite similar, a fiscal statement, and the rest of it had to be put on hold for more than 10 days due to that period of national mourning. The challenge for the Truss administration now is to get things back up and running, try to regain that momentum. And that's starting today, the first day that Parliament is back, swearing in today, not parliamentary business in terms of Prime Minister's questions or anything like that, but new swearing in from MPs and a statement that should be coming in around an hour's time from Jacob Rees-Mogg, explaining how that energy price cap for businesses will be introduced. Tomorrow, an announcement on the NHS from the new Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, how to get through that winter crisis that no doubt is coming with the backlogs that we are seeing. And then on Friday, that fiscal statement, which looks like it will be very expansive, not just the promises that Liz Truss made in her election campaign, that tax cut to national insurance, the energy levy, the green energy levy on bills being taken away, but also potentially enterprise zones and some regulatory changes to try and ensure that the economy can become more competitive. Well, in response to that, of course, the Labour Party will be saying that these are measures that are not particularly funded, that it's hoping to go for growth, and that to some extent that's a gamble.
OK, and we will be speaking to a member of the Labour Party. I'm just trying to think, is it Jonathan Reynolds this morning, just after 9 o'clock? It is Jonathan Reynolds. He's Shadow Secretary for Business and Industrial Strategy, and we'll get his take on all of that as well. Tom, thank you.
But right now we're going to take a break, and we're going to be talking about those tensions, those riots, those disturbances in Leicester between Hindus and Muslims. A lot to talk about there. Why is this happening? That's to come right after the weather picture.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland, but for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Time is 21 minutes past 8. Still to come on the programme this morning. Just after 9 o'clock, we'll be speaking to the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, if he supports the government's package for small businesses that's due to be announced today.
And we look forward to Martin Dobney with his views of all the top stories that we're dealing with. You know, a lot of news coming out of Russia. President Putin has made a national address there. And, of course, our Prime Minister, Liz Truss, she is in New York at the United Nations. So Martin will be giving his views on that. You've been giving us your views. You get in touch the usual way in the conversation. What have you got, Isabel?
Well, John's got in touch via email, thank you very much, saying long-term peace can only be assured with the democratisation of Russia. Mel says, ask the people of Ukraine, including tens of thousands of Russian-speaking passport holders who until 2014 lived peacefully in the east and southeast of Ukraine, Donbass region. As long as Putin and all political leaders accept the results of a clean referendum. Sorry, it doesn't make any sense to me, Mel. We won't read that one any further. And yes, lots of views. Keep those coming in. Putin and his gangsters are undoubtedly evil, says Martin, but we in the West are not blameless. Let us know your thoughts, because we're hearing, lots of concern about this partial mobilisation that's been announced this morning.
OK, keep those views coming in. Well, let's talk about the situation in Leicester. Well, on Saturday night, as most of the UK prepared for the Queen's funeral, Leicester was battling civil unrest. Clashes broke out between Hindu and Muslim groups right across the city. It prompted the Indian government to publicly condemn the attacks before Hindu and Muslim community leaders came together. Not much being said here, governmental-wise, about all of this. We want to explain why this is happening. The journalist Sunny Hundal has been keeping a close eye on what is going on. Sunny, what is going on?
Morning. So this it kicked off when there was a cricket match between India and Pakistan on the 28th of August. And basically some India fans were running around the streets of Leicester shouting religious slogans, but also shouting slogans against Pakistan. Apparently they beat someone up. And as a result of that, a lot of local Muslims felt that they were being targeted by Hindu gangs and started mobilizing. And then some of their people, there was a Muslim gang that went around some Hindu-dominated areas of Leicester and started taking down flags from Hindu groups, their houses, beating people up. And it sort of escalated from there on both sides, where people were on both sides, the Hindus and Muslims in Leicester were saying that their community was being targeted by people of the other community. And I fear that the police did not step in quickly enough, and it escalated to a point where on Saturday, around 300 people turned up in the morning in Leicester, and the police were unprepared. The Leicester police said initially they only had 8 officers, and then they called in for reinforcement. And Muslims
Sonny, when you're
point,
saying 300 people turned up in Leicester, are you suggesting that they were bussed in or they came from elsewhere?
Yeah, there's a lot of by people in Leicester, a lot of claims by them saying that most of these people were from outside of Leicester who had come in through social media, basically being told on social media that, you know, the local community needed their help and they had to come down there and help and against Muslims. So this was initially it was a Hindu group, and then as a result of that, a lot of Muslims locally as well as outside the city mobilized and came into the city to sort of say, well, we need to support our Muslim brothers and sisters against this. But to be honest, mostly for me, it was a bunch of men looking for attention and sort of looking to so-called protect the community. But, you know, that was not necessary. It was the Leicester police that it was their job. And this turned basically into a gang violence situation.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, couldn't you, about sectarianism generally, very often a long way from any of the religions involved and what they try and encourage people to do. But what about those commentators who are saying this is very much being whipped up by the nationalist media in India? We see these sorts of brawls, attacks happening a lot there, and I just wonder if you think we can now expect this sort of sectarianism to be a regular feature on British streets?
I wouldn't say it would become a regular feature. I think people here are a lot more sensible. They want peace. They want to go on with their lives. And, you know, it's in India, it's used as a political tool. So it's driven mostly by the state. And yeah, it's true. This was partly driven by India because what happened was that some of the videos that were spread around initially in the UK made their way into the Indian media, which then sort of turned it into something else and sort of added misinformation to it. And then it became a story. And then those video clips came back into the UK and started spreading around the UK, you know, with sort of wild claims that Hindus were being targeted all over the country. And that sort of set off a lot of apprehension amongst people, thinking that that Hindus in Leicester were being and elsewhere were being targeted. And so the Indian media, as well as social media, played a big part in amplifying and making this whole situation worse.
Now, Sonny, forgive my ignorance, but what is the difference between a Hindu and a Muslim? Why the antagonism? Why do they see differences between each other? What sets them against each other?
Well, I don't want to get into the theology, but you know, Islam is an Abrahamic religion. Hinduism has always been rooted in India, and the nationalist government of India feels that India should be a nation for Hindus first, and then Christians, Muslims and other minorities. So as a result of that, it has discriminated systematically, politically, in recent years. It came into power in 2014. It has discriminated against non-Hindus, and violence against them. Christians, churches, Muslim sort of mosques have been vandalized, attacked. You know, all this kind of stuff has been happening in India. And as a result of that, there's more tension abroad because people have obviously close links to some of their family in those countries. And there's a worry that that brand of Hindu nationalism is coming into the UK and also affecting the things here. And I think that's worrying. And I wrote a report for the Home Office in 2019 warning of this and saying that community relations could be severely impacted if we allow Hindu nationalism. Just as we, you know, should be wary of Islamist nationalism, you know, that brand of nationalism to come over here and take root over here would be dangerous for community relations in the UK.
Sunny Hindal, journalist and commentator, really interesting analysis. Thank you very much, shedding a lot of light for us on that and the concerning situation in Leicester. Thank you. Do come back again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming up to 8:30, we'll go to the break there. Back with the papers, David Miller and Claire Muldoon with those right after this.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, and then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
OK, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines at 8:31. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has used an address to announce a partial military mobilization in Russia. It was a pre-recorded, televised speech, and he said the West wanted to destroy Russia, and the mobilization was now a necessary step to ensure Russian territorial integrity. Russia's defense minister says 300,000 reservists will be called up.
The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is set to unveil details of a government support package to help businesses with energy costs. Ministers say the 6-month scheme will also include schools, hospitals, charities and other non-domestic consumers.
The government's being urged to reinstate the eviction ban during the cost of living crisis. The Kerslake Commission on Homelessness and Rough Sleeping says failing to do so could cause a catastrophic homelessness crisis.
It's time to go through the papers now with David Miller and Claire Muldoon, and often what they talk about outside the papers is much more interesting and entertaining.
I think we can't go back over that. Folks, do you want to know what we talk about? You wouldn't want to know.
You really wouldn't want to know, seriously.
But you do want to know, I mean, you both have a view on Prince Charles and his leaky pens. And
leaky pens or his short temper, as it's being widely viewed.
But do you know, I always think, Isabel, where you differ from me is, you're the sort of person that's frightened about having an enemy. I think you must be an awfully dull person if you go through life and you have nobody that doesn't like you. You've got, you know, if you just want everybody to like you, I think it's almost a badge of honour.
Can I just say, in defence of Isabel, you'd be blooming hard pushed not to like her. Okay, so you wouldn't want to be. You wouldn't need to have any enemies. Yeah. Unlike you.
No, I'm saying, why does Prince Charles care if anybody doesn't like him?
I think we all care. I remember when I was going through a bad patch, my dear old friend, the late David Frost, I said to him, I sometimes think the whole of the world hates me. He says, no, the whole of the world hasn't met you yet.
They couldn't have done so. That's Prince Charles, and you think it's a bad show to show about.
Look, you never saw Her Majesty the Queen lose her temper, and she was on the throne for 70 years.
I remember Princess Anne naff off, and Well, the Queen must have had one of those.
We never saw her lose her temper.
Philip always lost his temper.
Different. That's different. He wasn't the reigning monarch.
But just to bring it back to our purpose of the papers, I'm looking for the sun, you see, because the sun created the Queen,
metaphorically and literally.
Annus Horribilis, right? And they're going to have to change the agenda because Charles had, pen or no pen, had a good coronation, and I think people warmed to him.
Absolutely.
But here we have Jane Moore saying the king must tame his temper to earn and keep respect, and this gives her a way in to all the stuff. I'm going to read you one paragraph to show you where the sun, or where Jane Moore is coming from. According to various sources over the years, he has his pyjamas and sheets ironed daily and changes his clothes 5 times a day and leaves the cast-offs thrown around for others to pick up. 2 people dress him each day, and when he stays at friends' country houses, a truck goes ahead of him carrying his bed, furniture, and even pictures, including, and I bet you don't do this, his own loo seat, right?
Oh,
do you
come
think that's
on,
true,
nonsense.
do you?
I don't know whether it's true or not,
nonsense.
but I'm sure it's not. But basically, do you see, it's interesting to see agendas coming. The Sun wants to start having a go at Charles, and this sort of piece lines it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a
Having
shame.
said that, I know television presenters who do quite a lot of that that people wouldn't believe. I do actually, genuinely.
What, send toilet seats ahead?
No, they drop their clothes on the floor. They expect others to pick it up. You know,
Sounds like my husband. It's not just television presenters. And I do travel with my pillow. If I go to my parents, whatever, there's
But
no
that's
pillow like
legitimate
my
if
own
you've got
pillow.
a bad neck.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Or whatever, maybe.
I think he's fine.
Have a passionate relationship with your pillow.
So, Claire, what do you want to pick on here?
Well, let's just talk about the Channel 4 privatisation, because I think Michelle Donnellan had quite a run-in with Kay Burley on Sky News, and I think she might be good for the media as a media and culture secretary. Channel 4 privatisation plan will be put on hold, the government are now saying, after the paper being drawn up. I think Oliver Dowden did it on the government website. Of course, 1982, Channel 4 was set up, but it was set up at a time when there were only 3 other terrestrial linear channels, BBC One, BBC Two and ITV. And Channel 4, as we know, is publicly owned but commercially run. So in terms of budgets and everything else that Liz Truss has to do at the moment, and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget coming up, I think on Friday, is it? Anyway, so they'll be wondering how on earth they can build up revenue, and perhaps one of the reasons they want to sell off Channel 4 is to actually get some revenue. However, we're being told it's going to be put on hold. And I think it's quite a good idea to put it on hold, to be honest with you.
You go back to 1984 when I was Minister for Broadcasting, and Willie Whitelaw was incredibly keen to have Channel 4. He was obsessed with the idea of having another terrestrial channel. And so the only way we could do that was to have it as part of public service broadcasting, because there was no way it was going to be funded in that timescale. I can't think of a conceivable, logical reason why Channel 4 would be publicly funded.
I totally agree with you. Nobody would miss it if it was gone. No, you could pick up their programmes on Netflix or iPlayer or anything else.
That's part of the reason, but
I totally agree with you, David. I look at the whole spectrum and there's 50-odd channels there, and I don't see what is so unique about Channel 4 and why Willie Whitelaw would have got his knickers in a twist.
But it was a different world then.
Yeah. But what did he need? What was it supposed to do?
He liked the idea of being able to offer people choice. And to offer people what they were supposed to be doing, which was minority programmes. Well, he was quite enlightened in his way, you know.
Well, I look at it now, and Bruce Springsteen had that song, 52 channels and nothing on. That is absolutely right.
True.
The trouble is what Willie Whitelaw and Margaret Thatcher and everybody else did by opening up the whole market was that the nation is divided. You don't have an appointment of view. Nobody watches the same thing at the same time. There's no shared experience. And I don't think television is better for there being more channels. Certainly sport's not better for it. I know that.
No, I get that. But you look at the viewing figures for the Queen's funeral,
18... They watched one channel.
18.6 million people tuned into the BBC.
Yeah, they watched one channel.
Yes, which is that not unifying the public? Is that not bringing people together to
Yes,
watch
but what's
one
the point?
broadcasting?
What's the point of having all the other channels, including us, then?
Well, that's the point of deregulation.
But on channel, in relation to Channel 4, I think what we're saying is if someone wants to take the commercial risk of funding and running Channel 4, fine. But what it cannot be is yet another taxpayer-funded...
Yeah. But it's not funded by the taxpayer.
Well,
the Independent Broadcasting Association...
It's funded by its advert. It's commercially operated.
Solely?
I believe so, yeah.
But it says it's part publicly owned, part privately owned. I don't know. So we're paying for it somewhere.
I don't think we are paying for it, but someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
We are.
Constitutionally, it should be a private sector enterprise. Full stop, end of paragraph, you know?
On that topic, the BBC licence fee being revisited, Times page 8. I don't know who wants to pick this up.
Yeah, I think that that was one I chose, and basically that was begun under her predecessor. And the reality is that the BBC licence fee, in the eyes of a lot of people, is used to fund a whole lot of things that people do not care for. The BBC has foolishly allowed itself to be seen to be a hangout place for left-wing attitudes that are inconsistent with a nationally funded broadcaster. Now, this is not the week to criticise the BBC,
no,
because they did a very good job on the funeral, but they had to, because you remember the mess they made of some earlier national events. But essentially, why do we need a BBC licence fee? In the old days, it was because lots of things you couldn't get except on the BBC. Now you get everything on the BBC, off the BBC. And the idea that the BBC should have all that money to spend, regardless of what the competition is now doing, I think is wrong.
Well, I kind of tend to disagree, actually, because I think the licence fee is really great, excellent value for money. It's £159 a year at the moment. What I don't like is the effect. If you don't have your licence fee, then you've got the criminal aspect of it. You could be banged up. I think that's wrong, should be removed. But when you break it down, pound for pound, it's far better value than Netflix, than Sky, than Disney Plus, than Paramount, than them all, because you get so much more for your money.
It's British, isn't it? It's British content, and I think that's what people, you know, when people go after the BBC, the fear, of course, in all of this is that you end up just handing over the commercial rights to an American.
But Isabel, and with that, I think a really important point has to be made in foreign reportage. The BBC fund their foreign reporters all over the world, and they're often the first on the ground, and often the first to break stories.
It's an incredible indulgence to fund somebody in Whodinnistan or whatever. It's an incredible indulgence.
It's not an indulgence, because
it's an incredible indulgence.
It needs to be
reported.
And
also, you always know when the BBC are turning up, because they come along with half a dozen people. You know, I mean, this is just...
Is that where King Charles gets it from, then?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think also this idea that it's only British programming that's worth watching is a nonsense as well.
Oh, no.
Because
I don't think anyone thinks that, because BBC 3 and BBC 4 and BBC 2 got a lot of Danish programmes, got all those Scandinoirs and introduced them to this country.
I am addicted to, by the way. If you want an illustrated lecture about Scandinoirs, I'm your man. No one's asked me yet, but I live in hope.
Next pay-per review then.
Next advert break. It's far too low brow for you in the pay-per-view. Shall we raise the temperature a little bit and talk about the escalation this morning in that Putin address? Hasn't made the papers, but the Telegraph were widely predicting his declaration on occupied land in Ukraine, trying to absorb it through these referenda. What's your view in all of this, David? I mean, should we be concerned by what we've heard?
Of course one should be concerned if the man is indeed, as one or two of the newspapers are suggesting, deranged. Otherwise, it's desperation. You see, he's the boy who cries wolf. He thinks if he mentions the word nuclear weapons, he knows the little knees of the German Chancellor will knock. He assumes that Mr. Macron will want to tell his mum that he's rung up and had a conversation with him. He thinks that Europe will run away. But of course, the reality is that what has been proved here is that Putin's armed forces are not up to much. And one wonders in what great state of readiness his battlefield nuclear weapons are. But we cannot have a situation where we allow Putin to frighten us. But what we also need is resolute leadership in the West. I mean, in the days when I was around in a very minor role, someone like Reagan wouldn't put up with this and would say, you do, on private channels, you do this, we'll do that.
What do you think Liz Truss's advisors are telling her at the moment in New York? And what do you think the conversation she will have with Biden will be about?
Well, I mean, we know that they're going to talk about Ireland. We know that they will obviously talk about this. But, you know, if I was asked to choose the people I would want to represent me, I wouldn't go to either of them.
Yeah, but
you know, we're not talking about people who have either much experience or indeed... Yeah, I mean, when Truss met that awful Russian foreign minister...
Sergei Lavrov.
Yes, he intimidated her.
Well, yeah, he patronised her, but he was also hugely sexist. But she was widely praised, I think it's fair to say, along with Boris Johnson. And I know you're not the biggest fan of the duo, but their handling of this crisis has been widely praised.
Yeah, well, let's hope so.
And she said she's going to match funding to this year, next year. And as you say, you might not choose her to represent your views in the United States at this United Nations General Assembly, but a lot of people would say she's been hard line on this.
Well, let us hope that it goes well. I have no interest. Look, I want to believe in Liz Truss.
We've all got
it's
interest
just the
in
facts
it.
get in the way, but, you know...
Yeah, but I don't think that, you know, to deny the woman, you know, the fact that she's there or not even wanted to be there, the fact is she is, and we just have to hope that she has got decent advisors around her that can advise her to bring this thing to a halt and be good in it.
I believe in the power of prayer, and I'm praying a lot.
Good.
Other news this morning, you were sitting in the studio, actually, whilst we were talking about the situation in Leicester. These have been bubbling, these sort of sectarian tensions, lots of concern that this is a sort of rise of Hindu nationalism, the likes of which have been well established in India, all triggered by this cricket match between India and Pakistan back in the summer. Any thoughts on that, Claire, this morning?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to backtrack, actually, because we covered it. No, we covered it in two paper reviews this morning, and I was wrong to say it was racially motivated. It's culturally motivated, obviously. Sorry about that. But, you know, it's a very, very sad state of affairs that in a multicultural society like Leicester, like Birmingham, like Bradford, we have these cultural tensions now at such a high level over factions, OK? And the only one, and the commentator and journalist that you had on was great because he was just so succinct, so straight through the point. And he said, look, the only person that's come out to try and stir this up a bit was Modi in India. And I think that's true. I really, really do.
OK, Claire. Thank you very much, Claire. David, appreciate your take on those newspapers. Thank you very much. See you again next week. Thank you. The time now, 13 minutes before 9 o'clock. And very shortly, we're going to be talking about a new survey that shows that half of women are holding off on having children due to factors like COVID, the rising cost of living. It's also been revealed that fertility rates are at their second lowest on record.
We are going to be talking about all of that. I'm told we've actually had a few problems with our next guest. So in the meantime, I'm going to read out a couple of our views that have been coming in and see if we can re-establish that link for you this morning. Views coming in on the United Nations and Biden. Graham in Gloucester has said, as far as I'm concerned, Joe Biden should butt out and keep his nose out of British politics. That's in relation to the tweet he made yesterday. Lots of speculation. It was a jibe at Liz Truss and her low-tax pro-growth policies. But, of course, number 10 insisting that was not the intention of that tweet. We talked a lot earlier on this morning, didn't we, Eamonn, about the 4-day working week. Some research being published in the UK here saying that 86% of those companies involved in the survey will continue to use it. And David in Newmarket saying a 4-day week is a simple fix to so many workplace ills, productivity, staff feel good factor, etc. In addition, let's go the whole hog and get rid of Sunday shop opening, restore a special day to the week. This would surely benefit families in the long term.
So one of the things that we were going to talk about to Ola Jordan there, and this was saying that 50% of women put off having a child for various reasons. Did you feel pressure on that, Isabel? People think, career, you would often be getting a chance. She's putting her career before her family.
No, I did the opposite. Do you remember your shock when I told you I was pregnant and you thought, are you sure you want to do that? Yes. No, I just cracked on. Did what I needed to do. But I know a lot of women do feel it. But I think there's a load of factors which we'll go into when we talk to Ola, just about the dating scene and a lot of men not wanting to have children a lot younger, older. Anyway,
but when
you know what I mean.
About it, my parents' generation, they were having children 18, 19,
yes.
Getting married at that age. And now it seems to be around, 35
Yeah,
plus.
so the average age for having a baby in the UK is currently 30.6 years old. The estimate is that in 20 years' time, that will go up to 31.5. But 20 years ago, as you were saying, there were 3 times as many teenage mums as there are mums over 40. There were mums over 40, and it seems now it's definitely much more over 40s than teenage mums, which is a good thing, probably.
And thank goodness, because of medical science, people can, conceive in their 40s now, and there's all that business of IVF and egg freezing, which give people a chance to lead the life that they actually want when they want to do it. So that's what we're going to do now.
That kind of takes a lot of the naturality away about it. If it's like when you want it, you can have it. And you can go all out stops. And sometimes it's just not the way that we're supposed to live.
Well, yeah, you can't argue with biology, can you?
No.
And a lot of people get disappointed. And this idea that you could just freeze your eggs and have a baby when you're good and ready, it's a lot harder than that. And lots of people will tell you the process of harvesting eggs and going through IVF is often
Have we got this
traumatic.
interview?
No, we don't have the guests. So don't worry. No, I was just discussing with Claire that it's definitely not the easy option. But I suppose a lot of women decide to go, OK, I'm being told to stop talking to Claire, so I'm going to stop my thread there. Sorry, Claire. OK. Enough of you and me.
We could talk about football.
We could talk about football. No, heaven forfend. We're going to talk about 4-day working week, shall we? It seems possible. 86%, as I was just saying, of companies who took part in that trial said they would continue with it going forward.
OK, earlier we spoke to Charlotte Lockhart. She's the managing director and founder of the 4-day week global campaign.
So you are paid 100%. You are requested to reduce your hours by 80% or to 80%, but on the understanding that you're going to produce 100% of the productivity that you were before.
And, how possible is that? I mean, I was reading some background that actually in productivity terms, most people are only actually productive for 3 hours a day. So you could quite easily lop off a day and still have the same net result at the end.
Well, exactly. I mean, by that calculation, you only have to increase your productivity by 45 minutes a day to actually gain yourself a day. But look, the productivity conundrum is an international one, and it is at the heart of why Andrew Barnes started this journey in the first place. He was looking to understand what were the things that got in the way of people being productive in our business at Perpetual Guardian. So, so that's where the journey started. And so what we do with the businesses that join us, whether they be a fish and chip shop or an office or a retail chain, is actually help them understand exactly what productivity truly is. And then they can then look to how they might improve it. And so that's the conversation that we're having. You get all of the well-being aspects from reducing work time, which of course feeds into productivity. But sometimes there's some things you're doing at work that need to change.
So let's get 2 workers involved in all of this. Claire?
I'm for it. I think it's a great idea. And I think it would help families. I think it would help society.
So agree.
And I think, it's a very positive thing. I think it would help people health-wise as well. Just to have that extra day to, potter around, clean their homes, do things, have longer sleep, have better quality sleep.
Former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, I mean, you're just convinced that this would grind Great Britain to a halt?
Yes, definitely, yes.
Lazy?
Well, I think the problem is that there's a deal here which will be easily forgotten. The bit of the deal people will remember is they get an extra day off. The bit of the deal they will forget is that on the 4 days that they're working, they will have to be more productive. And I just don't think the mechanisms exist to ensure that happens.
I think a good model, and I think it's wonderful that you're here to talk to us about this, Charlotte, I think the model would be women working part-time job sharing. And I think if you were to ask any of them, they would say they are under the pressure and they do actually get things done in the time. I think it's a great thing.
They certainly do. And this is why we are doing this as a business-led initiative in the first instance, because there are business solutions that need to be factored in. Businesses do need to take responsibility for how they engage with their people and manage productivity in the long term. But there are businesses that have been doing this for quite some time, Perpetual Guardian being one of them, but there are a number of others internationally that have been doing it for time. And so for us, this is about getting companies doing it, getting those learnings and those practices into the workplace, and drawing the work community in.
I mean, you've got to be honest, there will be some who will take advantage of this. Do you not agree? I mean, we talk about the Great Resignation, people not wanting to go back to work after the pandemic. We talk about the snowflake generation, always afraid of a hard day's work. We talk about people going on the razzle-dazzle on a Thursday night and being hungover on a Friday. They'll just change that to a Wednesday night, won't they, if they're only doing a 4-day week? I mean, there will be people who take advantage of this.
But those are the people who are taking advantage of the system that you have now. And actually what the businesses that work on this program find is that that highlights that, and it enables them to actually properly manage it. If people are taking advantage in your workplace, it's because you let them.
The thoughts of Charlotte Lockhart a little bit earlier on GB News. After the break, we'll be speaking to the Shadow Business Secretary about trickle-down economics and if Labour supports Jacob Rees-Mogg's energy relief plan. But first of all, here's your Wednesday forecast.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland. But for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Vladimir Putin announces a new mobilization of troops in an address to the Russian people.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock, Wednesday, 21st of September. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster. Thank you very much indeed for your company.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has made a recorded address to the people of Russia, saying that his country's aim is now to liberate the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. He also confirmed that he is mobilizing more troops and reserved the right to use nuclear weapons.
Now, all of that happened while you were sleeping within the last couple of hours, and it comes as the United Nations meets in New York. There you see Liz Truss, our new Prime Minister, and she has a speech today to tell the world that they must prioritize economic growth to combat Russia and its manipulation of worldwide economies.
The Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, will today set out the details of a major government support package. The plans could cost tens of billions of pounds and will also, we're told, benefit schools, hospitals and charities. And as ever, we love to hear your views, your thoughts. Get involved, be part of the conversation. These are the ways to do it, written on your screen now.
With those views, tell us what you think should be the action taken against Russia, if any. Vladimir Putin, while you were sleeping, made a televised address saying that his country's aim is now to liberate the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine.
Viewed as a significant escalation, Putin also announced a partial military mobilization in Russia that starts today, which means Russia's defense ministry will now be calling up 300,000 reservists.
So conscription involved, and here's former Foreign Secretary Malcolm Rifkind on how that statement affects Russia's invasion.
This is another humiliation for President Putin. First of all, to have any mobilization at all, including of reservists, is an admission that he's losing the war, that he hasn't got adequate troops, and also that he has not been able to persuade people to volunteer to join the forces, because they've been trying desperately, including trying to persuade convicts in the prisons to join the army in order to reduce their sentences. So that's all obviously been a farce, and this is now what we're facing.
To you that a humiliated Putin is a dangerous Putin, and he said in that address this morning, which we should...
dangerous even before he was humiliated.
Well, I know, but this is like... Yes, go on.
A complete disaster from the moment the war began, because he was forced to withdraw from Kiev, the capital, which he thought he was going to take in a few days. He now has lost virtually the whole of the Kharkov Oblast, and he's now having to call out more troops because he knows his existing army is losing every day. That is very bad news for him. What is now credible is that it will be slow, but the Ukrainians now have a prospect of encircling the Russians in Kherson. They've already blocked the Russians from reinforcing Kherson, which is in the south, near Crimea, near the coast. And that will also mean yet another part of occupied Ukraine. I think slowly, it will take weeks, possibly even months, but will slowly be recovered by the Ukrainians. And I very much endorse the point that has been made by my colleague on your program, that the inability of the Russians to actually train the people they've got means that the Ukrainians will not have to face these new reservists being brought back. Some of them, if they bring out all the reservists, some of them will be quite elderly people, but let's assume they concentrate on the younger ones. These are not professional soldiers. These are people who have served a national service in Russia, as everyone has to do for a period of time. And they will both be very hostile to being brought back with the prospect of being killed or injured, but they also will be way out of training, and both physically, I suspect, as well in the military sense. So it'll be months before they could even begin to have any impact on the conflict. I think Putin knows that, but he's got to actually demonstrate that he's doing something more to at least theoretically give the Russians a better chance of recovering the offensive. Putin has always been willing to use this sort of blustering language. But, not only would nuclear weapons risk a response with nuclear weapons, because the United States in particular could not just ignore that, and Putin will be aware of that, but he would also entirely lose the support of China and India and other countries in Africa and Asia who have tried to remain more neutral in these matters, because the last thing they want is this crisis. We saw just a few days ago, India and China trying to say to Putin, we have concerns about what's going on here. This war shouldn't be continuing. Now, if they're saying that already, you don't need me to say how hostile they would be, any suggestion of using nuclear weapons if that came from Moscow.
Malcolm Rifkind speaking to us a little bit earlier this morning with his analysis on that breaking situation with that pre-recorded address from President Putin.
Well, meanwhile, the Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's set to announce a cap on energy prices for businesses. This has long been called for. Businesses taking a big hit on that front. It could cut the rates they pay by up to half.
Yeah, the announcement will include support for companies, charities and public sector organisations for 6 months from the 1st of October. For full analysis, let's get our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan. Nobody knows this stuff better than you, Liam. Look, lots of businesses have been absolutely terrified about what's coming ahead. And we've talked a lot about households, but the business focus has only really begun to capture the imagination of the government, you get the sense. Do you think, from what we're hearing so far, what we're being briefed, that what Jacob Rees-Mogg is going to come out with will be enough?
Well, it won't be enough in the sense that everybody's going to pay a lot more for their energy this autumn and winter, even with these really big government support measures for both households and businesses. Some of us have been talking for many, many months about the fact that businesses have no energy price cap. And we're not talking about big businesses. They're often able to look after themselves. They have sophisticated trading desks. They can buy energy forward. I'm talking about small and medium-sized enterprises who, like you and me, Isabel, ring up the energy company, shaking, with no bargaining power at all. So there's no energy price cap for business. A price cap will be introduced for business. It doesn't cap the total bill. It caps the unit of energy that they use. So if you use more, you will pay more. There are incentives to use less energy. A big thing about what Jacob Rees-Mogg, the new business secretary, is going to announce today is that this support for business, unlike the household support package, which will be detailed on Friday, which lasts for 2 years, this will last only 6 months. So that's not a lot of certainty for businesses. And after that, the indications are ministers will move to a case-by-case system whereby businesses won't know often until the last minute if they're going to get any support. So there's a little bit of certainty here for business, but precious little.
Interesting that included in all of this is discussion around services as well, because, just for example, last week I was at a curriculum evening at my school. The headmistress making an announcement to parents saying, please donate money to the school. The budget that we use to pay for our children is being blown out of the water by our energy bills. This looks to be addressed by this announcement today as well.
That's right. I mean, hospitals, schools have massive energy bills. They are part of the public sector, but they still have to buy their energy, even if they're buying it effectively with state money. So they will be included too. I doubt that the 6-month limit on this assistance will apply to them. The devil will be in the detail. Really interesting, though, that the government, after this hiatus, after Her Majesty's funeral, is hitting the ground running because businesses were absolutely desperate to get some information.
Well, Liam, hold that thought. On the subject of businesses, the Shadow Secretary for Business and Industrial Strategy, Jonathan Reynolds, on this one. Jonathan, you've heard what we have had to say here in the studio. We're waiting a government announcement. What would you like to see in that announcement? What needs to be done?
Well, good morning. Yes, well, as Liam said, I cannot stress enough just how desperate businesses are for some clarity, for some certainty, not just heavy users of industry, but your local pub, your local shop. They need to know what their costs will be, and they can't, frankly, tolerate or get through the cost. Many of them have been estimated. So I expect a freeze. I want a freeze of some sort. I need the detail into how long it's going to last for. What will happen, for instance, to people who hedge their energy purchases and have longer-term plans in place or have lost those? I think, crucially, two questions we'll have to have more detail on is, first of all, who is going to pay for this? Now, we would raise part of the revenue through a windfall tax. We think that's legitimate so that the full cost doesn't land on the taxpayer or on borrowing costs in the short term. And second of all, how are the government going to provide a long-term route away from our exposure to fossil fuel prices, away from our exposure, particularly to the cost of natural gas, both for heating but also for the cost of electricity generation? Hopefully we'll get that as well, but I'm a little bit worried, to be frank, in terms of the wider announcements the government have leaked out in the last few days. I do want to see this freeze on energy prices, but it has to be accompanied by a better long-term strategy than we've heard so far.
Yeah, well, you know you're not going to get the windfall tax. They're quite adamant on that, wishful thinking. But what I would say is this, what you're calling for, what's going to be delivered, whatever it's going to be from the government, it's too late now. I think the damage is done. We don't have to wait for the Office of National Statistics to report on this or whatever. A blind man on a galloping horse can go down the high street and see closure after closure. Restaurants, I mean, I just couldn't believe. I was saying yesterday in Belfast at the weekend, two favourite, a Chinese restaurant and an Indian restaurant, both closed. I mean, these are the sort of things, they're like cockroaches during an atomic attack. They will always stay open. They'll always be there, except they're not going to be there. And that's just an example. Look around the high street. Look around London when the Queen's funeral was taking place. And you just saw closed for business, closed for business. Not that they were just closed for the day. They were closed full stop. My point, Jonathan, is we can all talk about this, but the government, while they had that pantomime of that leadership challenge, while there was the summer recess from the House of Commons, you lot should have been in sorting this out, I would have thought.
Well, you are absolutely right, Eamonn, to say that the schedule, the cost for businesses, the business cycle cannot wait for the political cycle. And I can't tell you why the Conservative Party chose to have a leadership contest that seemed to last, well, forever, basically. You know, they needed to act. Obviously, I want to see action today. I think what you've just said, though, there reflects, frankly, a wider position. One thing I very much agree with the new government on is that the economy hasn't grown as it should have over the last 12 years. But I think the things that you're suggesting have made a contribution to that bleak image you put forward. That will be the impact of business rates, which need reform. It will be the impact of skills and labour shortages, the impact of a Brexit deal, which isn't optimal for business. All of these things, that's what needs action on Friday when we get that mini budget or effectively a budget from the new Chancellor. What would worry me is everything we've heard so far, it's not on those real issues affecting businesses. It's things like lifting the cap on bankers' bonuses, which is frankly marginal for the vast majority of businesses in this country. It is ripping up people's employment rights, which we explicitly promised wouldn't happen after the Brexit referendum. Things like cuts to corporation tax are no good if you're not making any profit to begin with. So this is what I want to see from the new agenda from the government. What we've heard so far is the absolute opposite of that. And to be frank, I think Joe Biden is right and Liz Truss is wrong when it comes to how he should approach the economy.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that specifically in that tweet that was dropped yesterday afternoon by the President of the United States ahead of this bilateral meeting between the two leaders at the United Nations today. I mean, widely being viewed as a direct dig or jibe at who would not naturally be a bedfellow for a Democratic president anyway, in the form of a Conservative leader. Downing Street playing this down very much, but you agree with what President Biden's saying?
Well, I think Biden is right in what he said. I think the Americans are too diplomatic to have purposefully designed that, but it does undermine what Liz Truss is saying. I mean, on the media round I've been on this morning, I understand Conservative ministers are now saying Liz Truss doesn't believe in trickle-down economics, but what she has said is very clear. She believes that if the well-off do better, that is to the benefit of everyone as a whole. And I'm afraid the evidence doesn't support that whatsoever. I don't think the problem with the UK in the last 12 years has been that Conservative governments have been too benign. They've been too egalitarian. I mean, we've seen huge growth of food banks, huge growth of in-work poverty. This is evident to anyone who's familiar with this country. So I think her analysis is quite simply wrong. And the kind of things that I would like to see to get economic growth going, a proper long-term partnership with business, a modern industrial strategy, reform of business rates, more investment in skills and training, transport, that's a huge issue for business. So is childcare. These are real issues. The problem with the Conservative Party is it keeps looking for a magic wand, whether that's cuts to corporation tax, which, by the way, didn't increase business investment when George Osborne tried them, or things like the super deduction, which was a very short policy from Rishi Sunak to try and increase investment in assets and machinery. They're too short-term, they're too gimmicky. And quite frankly, they're right to admit their record on the economy has been very poor for 12 years, but it doesn't feel like to me they're yet talking about the things that would really matter and make a difference.
Well, you are fired up on what you believe really matters and will make a difference, Jonathan Reynolds. And, before the week's out, maybe we'll get back and we'll talk to you again about what is going to be announced. But thank you very much indeed for outlining your proposals, how you would fix things. Jonathan is the Shadow Secretary for Business and Industrial Strategy. Thank you very much indeed. Liam Halligan, just what were you, certainly one area you would be, or I wonder if you're at odds with Jonathan Reynolds. I mean, he's talking about fossil fuels and the government's got to announce how they will detach themselves from being dependent on that. You think fracking may be back in business?
Indeed, fracking is the quite controversial method of extracting gas from shale rock. You have to sort of have mini explosions underground to extract the gas. It's been very successful in America. It's helped America in recent years to become an energy exporter. For years, America's depended on foreign energy, but not now. And so the wholesale price of gas in America is much, much lower than it is in Europe.
And it affects their inflation rate as well. It keeps it down.
It does, and it means that their businesses can be more competitive in some areas. Now, when Liz Truss made that truncated announcement in the House of Commons before the unfortunate news of Her Majesty's deterioration in health emerged, she did mention that she wanted to lift the moratorium on fracking. This moratorium was introduced in November 2019, just before Boris Johnson went for re-election. He thought it would appeal to younger voters and the environmentally conscious voters. Liz Truss is now going to lift that moratorium. Whether or not it happens in Jacob Rees-Mogg's announcement today about supporting business or later this week, even in Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget on Friday, we don't know. So as part of my work here on GB News, I talk to many, many business leaders. And one person I spoke to recently is Francis Eagan. He's the CEO of Quadrilla. Now, Quadrilla is the leading fracking company in the UK. They've actually explored fracking wells up in the northwest, in particular in Lancashire near Blackpool. And Liz Truss said in the Commons that if we lift the moratorium on fracking, there could be gas fracked in the UK within 6 months. Now, a lot of people poured cold water on that. A lot of people said that's outrageous, that's ridiculous. So I asked Francis Eagan, the guy who really knows about fracking, whether or not that 6-month time frame put forward by Liz Truss was realistic. And this is what he said.
Quadrilla has 2 existing wells that we've already drilled into the shale rock in Lancashire, just outside of Blackpool. And in fact, we had partially fracked and tested gas back to the surface from those wells. So we know the gas is already there. So we would have to mobilize equipment back onto that site and complete the job. Now, from getting the equipment onto site, that should only take a matter of months. Initially, it would be relatively small, modest quantities of gas, but it's an important starting point.
OK. Right. Liam, thank you very much indeed for all of that.
A little bit of breaking news. Yeah, a little bit of breaking news for you. The business energy relief first announcement has dropped, as we like to say in the industry, from the government. They are saying that gas and electricity costs for UK businesses, charities and public sector bodies will be capped at £211 per megawatt hour, while gas prices will be capped at £75 per megawatt hour, in line with what was reported overnight. Suppliers are to apply the reduction automatically to all eligible non-domestic customers, with the government compensating suppliers for the cost. And this will apply to contracts signed since April the 1st this year and run until the 31st of March next year. Liam Halligan, thoughts on that first announcement?
Those numbers were knocking around in briefings last night. They're about between a third and a half below prices currently on the spot market, prices that businesses are currently paying unless they're tied into an existing contract. So it's a major move by the government. A lot of people are saying it's going to cost tens of billions, even hundreds of billions of pounds. I would say all that, well, it's true, all that depends on where the wholesale price of energy actually is. And that, in turn, depends on a lot of the geopolitical factors we've been hearing about this morning, not least the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Liam, leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. With the time at 18 minutes past 9, we'll take a break. Martin Dobney taking you through some of the controversial stories that have been featuring in the papers today. But first of all, here's the weather forecast.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland. But for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We've been on air from 6 o'clock this morning. We've covered a whole range of subjects. Where do you begin? We bring Martin Dobney in, the journalist and commentator, former MEP as well. Martin, of all the things we've talked about and seen and you've got there in the papers, what would you like? What's caught your eye? What would you like to begin with?
Well, I think we really need to talk about the ongoing mob violence, the religious sectarianism that's happening across the Midlands. Started in Leicester after the cricket match between India and Pakistan, rolled into Smethwick in the West Midlands last night. 200 mob of Muslims outside a Hindu centre stopping somebody from speaking they didn't like. Riot police were called in, pelting them with firecrackers and bottles. And I think we really have to talk about this as an issue of multiculturalism. And we need to think, has multiculturalism worked or has it been a failure? And who's to blame? Now, Claudia Webb, who's an MP for Leicester East, is blaming outsiders, nationalists, the far right. The Muslim Council of Great Britain are blaming far-right Hindus who've recently arrived from India, blaming immigrants. That's normally what the far right do. I think we need to look actually at a total and utter systemic failure by the British authorities and institution of how we have allowed cultures to live side by side with little integration. And that includes every member of Parliament, every successive government since the Blair years. We need to look at the mainstream media who've soft-soaped this and ignored the issue. We need to look at police forces who've turned a blind eye, particularly in places like Rotherham and Telford, to grooming gangs for fear of being called racist. We have a complete breakdown of an integration now, and we really, really need to address this.
Did they learn nothing from Northern Ireland, keeping Catholics and Protestants apart?
And it's really interesting you say that, because the language being used, and everyone's always responsible on the other side. It's the same in Israel and Palestine. These historic, age-old conflicts that we've grown up with are now on our shores. And we've imported these problems, but we're also not dealing with them in the media and in the courts of law.
Okay. But I mean, when you talk about the issue of sectarianism as if we haven't had it here before, I mean, it's not as easy as integrating people into society. I mean, if it was so easy, we would have done it, surely.
Well, it's been attempted many times and it's been ridiculed, always. So, for example, when David Cameron said, let's have a British constitution, a Bill of Rights that we all sign up to, it was all kind of tea and Union Jack waistcoats and warm beer, absolutely lambasted and pilloried by the liberal media. And I think that's the problem. We aren't allowed to say...
Liberal media have tiptoed around covering this as well, I have to say.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I pointed out in an argument about this, you would cover a loyalist Republican riot in Belfast and you wouldn't care.
Yeah.
You wouldn't mind who you identified or not, whatever. But they're tiptoeing. It's taken 3 or 4 days.
Well, we have been distracted, to be fair, by pretty
come on, this is pretty serious stuff.
I'm not denying that, but I think people have taken their eye off the ball and this has been allowed to bubble.
I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. I can see this getting worse. The violence is getting worse by the day. And where's it going to end?
Right. Joe Biden, American interventionism in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, this is really interesting because do you remember when Obama came to Britain and said we'd be at the back of the queue if we did Brexit? And all the Liberals said, yeah, great. No, it's an American president interfering in British democracy. And then now Joe Biden is back. He's criticising the British government on 2 things. I think it's because they sat him at the back of the Queen's funeral. I think he's got the hump that he was basically in the rows where it's closest to the toilet. Perhaps he needs it in his old age. Anyhow, he's criticising the trickle-down Reaganomics that Liz Truss is putting in. They're not trickle-down, that she's tax cuts across the board. Should hopefully benefit everybody along with the energy prices. But he's also interfering on the Northern Ireland Protocol, insisting the UK must negotiate with the European Union, basically on the EU's terms because of his Irish heritage. He's sticking his nose in majorly. Now, do you remember, guys, when Donald Trump said he thought Brexit was a good idea, and the same people were furious that an American president had an opinion on British politics? Biden is a meddler. He's a globalist. He prefers the EU to the UK. The special relationship, I think, is all but in tatters. And I think he'll get elected out and we'll get a new Republican president in and we're back to business.
Although we might get a Labour government if the polls are anything to go by.
Well, that's
just flip on its head.
If the
altogether.
polls
Who knows?
If the polls are anything to go by, we never would have had a Brexit or President Trump. So the polls are for the polls.
OK.
Martin, unfortunately, we've got to leave it there. We're out of time.
Ah.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your take on those stories.
We'll be back tomorrow from 6 o'clock. Coming up next, Tom Harwood has the briefing for you. Before that, though, here's your forecast.
Good morning, I'm Helen Roberts with your latest weather forecast, and today it's looking fairly similar to yesterday. Quite a lot of cloud around, but it will be dry for the majority of us, and there will be some occasional bright or even sunny spells. Now, there is a change coming for many of us later in the week thanks to this weather front currently affecting the far northwest of Scotland. But for the rest of us, high pressure is in charge, keeping things fairly quiet and settled for the time being. So like I said, today is a repeat performance of yesterday, really. A little bit of early morning mist and fog should burn away fairly readily. Variable amounts of cloud as we head through the day, perhaps becoming a little bit more extensive through the course of this afternoon, perhaps even thick enough in a few spots to produce the odd drizzly shower, but that will be the exception rather than the rule. It will be dry for the majority of us. But I did mention this weather front affecting the far northwest of Scotland. That will become increasingly cloudy, bringing further outbreaks of rain, which will become more persistent and at times heavier through the latter part of the day today and overnight and into Thursday. So you can see this weather front becoming increasingly present across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland into the start of Thursday. Still elsewhere, though, remaining fairly quiet, similar to the last few days, with variable amounts of cloud, but dry for most. However, that weather front continues to make slow but steady progress southeastwards during the course of Thursday. So outbreaks of rain moving into northern England, western parts of Wales, clearing behind. There will be a few showers here where it will turn cooler and fresher. And to the southeast of this weather front, remaining fairly cloudy, but with some brightness at times and generally dry. So that weather front continues to move southeastwards into Friday, so affecting the Midlands and the southeast, bringing outbreaks of rain, clearing at the weekend.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate.